The story began at the Royal School of Delan, where a teacher was trying to get the students' attention while enthusiastically saying that everyone was living in the age of heroes. 5,000 years had passed since the first hero appeared in the underworld. Since then, many things had changed. The Royal School of Delan had been chosen as the venue for the prestigious Lumain entrance exam. The teacher continued his speech with conviction, saying that all the students present had great qualities to become heroes. He was excited about the class's potential until he noticed a student sleeping. Irritated, he caught his eye, called him by name, Leo, and began to scold him while saying that he should have known how important the content was. Even so, he was asleep in the middle of class. Without wasting any time, the teacher asked a direct question, wondering if Leo knew how, 5,000 years ago, heroes performed their rituals in order to be recognized as true heroes. Leo got up, still drowsy, and answered dismissively, saying that if the person was famous, it didn't matter much. This was Leo Prov, a 15-year-old boy known for his carefree and defiant personality. The teacher was even more outraged by the answer and said it was wrong. He then asked the class if anyone else wanted to answer correctly. A student sitting next to Leo raised his hand and explained that in ancient times, heroes were recognized by the gods. Only sacred rituals were used to select them, and one of the first was the blood ritual. The teacher was pleased with the answer and praised the student, saying that he expected this from Gullivian, the greatest magical genius in the kingdom. Gullivian Tratton smiled proudly at the praise and looked up at Leo, but Leo remained indifferent and didn't even react. He just thought to himself that in those days, finding gods was extremely easy and that rituals were the least of it. Then it was explained that, in the past, the world received a miracle as a way of honoring the heroes who had faced Erebos. This gift became known as the heroic record. Leo, however, felt uncomfortable when he realized that his name wasn't on the register, even though he was the reincarnation of the great hero Kyle, a name that, over time, had been completely forgotten. Before Leo could lose himself in his thoughts, the students' attention was diverted by commotion outside the school. Important people had arrived, and at the center of the commotion was a heroine who stood out. Shortly afterwards, the students received a message informing them that everyone should gather in the auditorium for a compulsory assembly. The school was being visited by the prestigious Zerdinger clan. Gullivian turned to Leo and teased, asking if he would also try to be noticed by the Zerdinger clan, as if that were possible for someone like him. Leo stood up calmly and replied that he had no interest in that sort of thing, and that, unlike the others, he would just go home. After the lesson, Gullivian, still irritated by Leo's indifference, said that he didn't care about the nobles of the Zerdinger clan either. Leo just shrugged and left, leaving Gullivian even more frustrated. Later, Leo was training in an isolated field. There was a sword stuck in the ground, but he wasn't using it. He was concentrating on movements with something the length of a stick. As he practiced, he thought the training was paying off, but his current body didn't have the same stamina as the one in his previous life. He remembered that, in his past incarnation, he could do all this with ease. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't notice someone approaching until he heard a voice asking him what he was thinking about. Leo looked up and saw a woman. Before he could answer, she advanced with a real sword, not a wooden one. Startled, Leo defended himself as best he could and complained about being ambushed like that. The woman smiled, without reducing the intensity of her blows, and said that it had been a long time since their last duel. According to her, lackluster talent wasn't enough to get into Lumen, so he should consider it his last test. She advanced again, this time with a ferocity that took him by surprise. Leo could barely keep up with the blows and had to retreat quickly to avoid being hit. He shouted that she wasn't showing him much love as a mother, but his mother just laughed and said that he was blocking everything, so she wanted to see if he could take any more. This time, she increased the speed of the attacks even more and asked him in a challenging tone if he could dodge it. Leo managed to narrowly avoid, but part of his hair was torn out in the process. Taking advantage of the gap created, he executed a precise move and managed to knock his mother down, surrendering her and winning the duel. Leo asked if she was all right, showing concern. She stood up slowly, cleaning her clothes while looking at her son with a mixture of admiration and surprise. She wanted to know how far he had come in that training session, but Leo didn't answer, just straightened his posture while still breathing hard. His mother smiled and asked if he really wanted to go to Lumine. It was explained that Lumine was the largest human academy of heroes among the academies of the 4 races registered in the heroic register. Leo believed that he could find more traces of his past there. He replied firmly that, of course, he wanted to go. She nodded and said that the Zerdingers had passed through Delan and were staying at their mansion. This surprised Leo, and his mother went on to say that she would ask a favor of of Zeus Zerdinger, her friend, to teach Leo the Zerdinger aura technique, saying that this would surely get him into Lumen. Leo sighed as he thought about this aura, but replied with confidence that he would be admitted that year and not the next. Meanwhile, at the Zerdinger mansion, a carriage pulled up in front of the gate. A 15-year-old girl got out and looked around with a certain disdain, wondering why her uncle wanted to stay there so much, since with the money and respect they had, they could rent a whole hotel. This was Celia Zerdinger, also 15 like Leo. Despite her arrogance, she was focused on preparing for the Lumen entrance test. While she was observing her surroundings, a man approached her and asked if she wasn't curious to see how Leo was doing, remembering that he was the only one who had said he didn't care about the Zerdinger clan. That man was Zeiss Zerdinger, the clan's vice patriarch. Celia replied with a nonchalant tone, saying that Leo couldn't even use his aura yet, so it probably wasn't that impressive. Zeiss chuckled after hearing Celia's remark and commented that he didn't think that was the case. Later, at the Plov mansion, the Zerdinger clan received a formal welcome. As soon as he arrived, Zeiss flashed a warm smile and greeted his hostess, saying how wonderful it was to meet her again. Leo's parents introduced themselves, with his mother Reina Plov bowing slightly in welcome, while his father Dade Plov remained firm and formal, saying that they were Reina and Dade Plov, the patriarchs of House Plov, and that it was a pleasure to welcome them. Zeiss smiled and turned to his niece, asking her to introduce herself. Celia stepped forward and bowed slightly in a polite tone, saying that she was Celia Zerdinger, the sword princess of the Zerdinger clan, and thanked them for welcoming her that week. Reina held out her hand to greet her, and Celia was surprised by the direct gesture but shook her hand. Reina said it was nice to meet her, and meanwhile Celia was pensive, watching Reina carefully, noticing her black hair and red eyes, and wondering if they were related. Z seemed to read her thoughts and casually remarked that he had forgotten to mention that Reina Plov was his aunt. Celia's eyes widened in surprise at the revelation, but she kept her composure. Later at the mansion, the maids passed back and forth while a conversation took place at an elegant tea table. Zeiss, relaxed, commented that during his time at the Royal School of Delan, the students had been completely chaotic, but he confessed that Reina's son seemed unimpressed and didn't even show any concern. Reina smiled slightly and said that it had probably hurt some Zerdinger's ego, apologizing if Leo's behavior had been disrespectful, explaining that he didn't mean any harm, he just wasn't naturally interested in many things. Zeiss, curious, leaned forward a little and asked exactly what kind of child Leo was. While Reina was trying to organize her thoughts to answer, Leo and Celia were having a duel outside. Reina, answering firmly, said that he had unbelievable talent. Zeiss looked at her for a moment and asked seriously if she really thought Leo was worthy of inheriting the Zerdinger flames. Reina took a deep breath before saying that she wasn't just saying that because she was his mother, but because she genuinely believed that Leo was worthy. Zeiss gave an intrigued smile and said that, with Reina talking like that, he was beginning to take an interest, adding that perhaps it would be better to test the boy himself. Meanwhile, on the training field, Leo was finishing his duel with Celia. She was visibly frightened and could barely follow his movements, while Leo remained calm, with a confident smile on his face. Later, Leo went off to meditate, concentrating on his power, until he felt something change inside him. He opened his eyes in surprise and with an expression of fulfillment, for he had finally reached the stage he had longed for. It seemed that he had reached a new level of power, something that made him capable of withstanding everything he wanted to conquer. Leo continued to meditate deeply, reflecting on his difficulty in mastering his own aura. He thought the reason for this was clear. Since the moment someone accepts their aura, the body automatically begins to mold itself to it, limiting the opportunity to accumulate more mana and soul energy. In his past life, he hadn't made the most of this window of opportunity, and if he had accumulated more power, he might have avoided the disaster he faced. Now, he was determined to change that. While he was immersed in these thoughts, a voice called out to him. Leo opened his eyes and saw Celia Zerdinger staring at him. For a moment, the two were silent, until she said that he seemed to have a good basic control of his powers. She gave a slight smile and went on to say that she could guide him, especially in fencing, asking him what he thought. Leo arched an eyebrow in confusion and asked who the hell she was. Celia crossed her arms with an air of authority and replied that she was Celia Zerdinger, known to the world as the Princess of the Sword. Leo stood up, shrugged, and replied in a casual manner that was fine, thanking her with a polite but disinterested tone and saying that he wasn't interested in learning anything from her. Celia frowned, visibly irritated, and asked if he thought he was more powerful than her. Leo replied calmly and directly that that, in a fight to the death, she was probably stronger, since he still couldn't use his aura, but that, in a fair duel, he believed the story would be different. Celia's eyes widened in surprise at his confidence, and without much thought, she looked at a nearby sword, picked it up, and issued a challenge. She said that if he was that confident, they could duel, watching him for a moment to gauge his reaction, until she added with a defiant smile that if she won, he would be her servant for as long as she was in that house. Leo crossed his arms and asked, with a slight smile, what would happen if he won. Celia shrugged and replied that, in that case, she would be his servant. Leo picked up his wooden sword and stepped forward, saying they could begin. Without hesitation, he advanced with impressive speed, and Celia managed to block on instinct, but was surprised by the force of the attack. She thought it had been powerful, but not yet powerful enough to be a problem. However, Leo's gaze was different, his eyes shining with fierce determination. He began to press her intensely in combat, with quick, precise attacks. Celia, now on the defensive, wondered frantically what kind of strength that was, because that boy looked like a monster. She was forced to hesitate for a moment as she realized that if she blocked the next blow directly, she would be knocked down right there. Leo didn't even give her time to breathe and continued pressing relentlessly, leaving her with no way out. Celia thought desperately that she couldn't block that attack, but it was too late. When Leo finally hit her, he asked with a defiant smile if she had covered herself in aura armor since the duel was supposed to be pure fencing. Celia replied a little sheepishly that it had been a reflex and that she had actually used an aura barrier. Leo shrugged and said that it didn't matter, as he would still win. Celia, a little annoyed, wondered if that boy really knew what he was talking about, since he didn't even seem to understand the difference between an aura user and someone who couldn't use it. Leo then threw down a pair of magical weight bracelets, similar to those worn by Rock Lee, and smiled at how light his body felt. He began to attack Celia's aura armor as if it were made of paper. Each blow was precise and crushing, and Celia, feeling all the pressure with her broken sword, wondered in awe what exactly she was up against. Meanwhile, in the house, Reina and Zeiss strolled around the courtyard. When Reina saw Leo, she called him over to introduce herself to the great guest. Leo approached with a smile and said his name, introducing himself as Leo Plov. Zeiss shook his hand and replied that he was Zeiss Zerdinger, his uncle. Reina then asked if Leo knew where Celia was, and he looked back to see her being carried on a stretcher. With a slight expression of surprise, he replied that she was there. Everyone wondered what had happened to her, and Zeiss, curious, approached to understand the situation better. Upon hearing the story, Zeiss was surprised and asked in a serious tone if Leo had really defeated Celia without using an aura. Leo confirmed with a smile and said that she had underestimated him. Zeiss, already getting to know his niece, asked with the tone of someone who had expected something like this, what bet she had made that time. Leo replied with a mischievous grin that whoever lost would become the other's servant, in which case he would have Celia as his maid for the next week. Zeiss laughed, but his gaze showed that he was reflecting on the weight of the situation. He said that keeping one's word was important, but that Celia was from House Zerdinger, and that they couldn't just treat her like that. Leo firmly replied that he would do the punishing, and that she would have to take responsibility for what she had done. Zeiss, looking more serious, asked if he would stand by that decision, even if the reward was learning to use the aura of the Zerdinger clan. Leo replied without hesitation that an aura taught that way, just so his niece wouldn't be humiliated, wasn't that valuable. Zeiss was visibly irritated by the answer, and exclaimed that Leo had just declared that he would make a direct descendant of the Zerdingers his maid, as well as devaluing the clan's aura, asking if this was really true. Leo, with a reassuring smile, confirmed exactly that. Zeiss, visibly indignant, asked if Leo didn't think he was being too reckless. Leo replied calmly, saying that he hadn't meant to insult him, but that if the reward was for defeating Celia, he would accept it. But he wouldn't accept anything just to avoid her being humiliated, because it seemed that Zeiss believed that if Celia hadn't let her guard down, she wouldn't have lost. Zeiss remained silent, thoughtful, and Leo went on to say that this thought was wrong, because even if she had used all the power she possessed, she would still have lost. Zeiss was surprised to hear this and reflected on Leo's response, thinking that this child really was out of the ordinary. He then called the guards and ordered them to take Celia to the maid's dormitory. The guards were shocked by the order, but Zeiss remained imperturbably calm and called Leo back, saying that on occasions like this, which were not official, he could call him uncle. Leo, without hesitation, responded directly, calling him uncle. Later, as they were saying goodbye, Zeiss turned to his sister Reina and said that she had previously asked him to teach Leo the aura, but that now she thought she could convince him to learn something else, the breath of the phoenix. In Leo's room, Celia was already in uniform as his personal maid for the next week. On seeing her, Leo commented that the outfit had suited her very well, and that it was surprising how well she matched that type of dress. Celia, a little embarrassed, replied that she knew she was pretty, but that he didn't need to talk like that. Leo tried to correct himself by saying that he hadn't meant to mock, and that he had a friend who valued beauty very highly, but that his habits were very annoying. This friend Someone used to say that the beauty of the eternal was incomparable, and that if peace ever returned to the world, he would spend the rest of his life spreading beauty everywhere. Leo then thought to himself that the problem was that this friend was very honest, and he was saying that to two girls. Although one of them was aggressive, Lucina's was more beautiful than any other woman he had ever seen. And as for Luna, there was no mention of her. He even thought that, for the sake of art, perhaps they could pose nude for him, but obviously the response was a shower of beatings. Meanwhile, in the real world, Celia watched him and wondered what kind of book he was reading. Leo casually replied that he was reading a story he used to read a lot, called The Great Hero of the Beginning. Celia found it strange and commented that it wasn't just a fairy tale, which she herself had read when she was about 5 years old, and she thought that boy was very strange. After that, she approached the bookcase and commented that he really seemed to like that story. As she looked more closely, she teased that not even a researcher of the great hero would have as much material as he did. Leo retorted that it was just a collection, but Celia continued to think that it was really worth reading so many books about the great heroes of the beginning, especially about the whole group. She kept looking and, curious, asked why there were so many books about Kyle. Leo explained that of all the things the heroes had done, many could not be attributed to a specific hero, and that, for this reason, many of these achievements ended up being attributed to Kyle. Celia, however, retorted by saying that that Kyle guy must have just been a scammer who tried to steal the fame of some real hero. Surprised, Leo repeated the name Kyle, and Celia replied that that was what everyone thought, including her. Leo muttered to himself in dismay, realizing that this was how the world saw him, and said that he now understood what everyone thought of him. After a moment, Leo stood up, closed the subject, and changed focus, saying that it was time for them to have coffee and train. Celia, surprised by the offer, asked if she could really train with Leo, and inside she thought that this was the perfect chance to discover the secret of his strength. But Leo warned her that if she trained with him, she wouldn't be able to keep up, and asked if it was all right with her. Of course, Celia felt deeply offended by the comment. But later, during training, she realized that she really couldn't keep up with Leo's pace. He then explained that when someone's wings are stretched to the limit, their reflexes slow down and there are a lot of gaps in their movements. And when that happens, their guard breaks down, and that's when the flaws appear. Confused, Celia asked if abusing his body like that was good for his training and if he really did it every day. Leo laughed and replied that that generation was very weak, reflecting to himself that, compared to the past, aura techniques had indeed improved, but that this had made people more careless with their bodies. The aura helps to improve physical strength, but as Leo explained, 0 multiplied by 1,000 is still 0. Celia, standing up shakily, shouted in indignation when he asked if he was calling her weak. Leo thought that if one trained one's body, one's aura would naturally improve too. At that moment, Celia stood up again in a rage and called him a white-haired bastard, charging at him with everything she had. Leo, however, landed only one blow and knocked her down again. Celia rolled across the floor like an out-of-control old car, and Leo approached her calmly, seeing that she was extremely angry, and asked if it was difficult. He held out a magic bracelet to her, and when Celia took it, she almost fell over with the weight. Leo explained that, from the next day, she would wear it during training. Later, outside, Celia was once again being completely destroyed during training, while Zeiss watched from afar and thought that this experience would be good for her, because before going to Lumine, Celia needed to learn to deal with her ego and pride. Zeiss caught Leo's eye, who was further ahead, completely intact, and approached him easily to talk. He commented that he had been thinking about it and suggested that perhaps Leo could learn the breath of the phoenix, asking what he thought of it. This made Leo visibly interested, as he knew that the breath of the phoenix was the origin of all the Zerdinger family's abilities, and had heard that only selected people who were well recognized by the family could use it. Celia, overhearing the conversation, teased him, telling him not to think that he would be accepted so easily. Zeiss agreed and explained that there was one condition, which was that Leo had to pass the entrance test for Lumine. Celia immediately reacted by saying that it was too serious and too difficult, saying that Leo couldn't even use an aura, and that it would be dangerous for him. Leo just gave a reassuring smile and replied that, in fact, he had no combat experience in this life, but inside he remembered his past life and thought that, as far as experience was concerned, he had plenty. Even so, he recognized that what he had said was true for his current situation. Zeiss insisted and asked him directly what he thought of his condition. Leo asked about his parents, and Zeiss replied that this would, of course, depend on their permission. Leo confidently replied that it was fine and that he was fine with it. Zeiss smiled proudly, thinking that this boy was already planning to take the exam later that year. Leo then turned to Celia and told her he was well rested. A week later, on the day of the entrance test for Lumen, everyone was impressed by Celia's presence there, as it was obvious that she had become the center of attention. Celia looked at Leo with a teasing tone and asked if the young master teacher was nervous. Leo replied calmly, saying that he wasn't, in fact. But Celia noticed something strange in his tone of voice and retorted, asking what that way of speaking meant. Before she could say anything else, someone caught her eye, and as she turned, she saw Galivian Tratton. Galivian was impressed to see Leo next to her and, curious, asked what he was doing there if he didn't even have an aura. He also asked how Celia was, but they both ignored him completely. Nevertheless, he insisted on introducing himself again, saying that he was Galivian Tratton, the same one they had met at school, and bragged about calling himself a great genius of magic. Celia coolly replied that she couldn't remember. Without ceremony, she took Leo by the hand and walked off, leaving Galivian behind without any explanation. Suddenly, another voice called out to her, and this time Celia seemed even more surprised. It was Abad Llewellyn and Chelsea Llewellyn. I would remark casually that it had been a long time since they had last met. Leo, confused, asked Celia who these people were. She replied with a slight grimace that they were the Llewellyn brothers, from the same lineage as the heroes of the Lord and Empire. It was clear that Celia didn't like them very much, as she whispered that if they got in their way, they couldn't lose, as the Zerdinger clan would never accept a defeat for the Llewellyn family. Leo, on the other hand, just muttered to himself that it all seemed like a big fuss just because of a plov. Meanwhile, the Llewellyn brothers were still standing there, looking imposing and confident. Celia tried to remain calm, and responded by saying that it had been a long time. Abad, with an air of superiority, asked who the boy next to her was. Celia replied firmly that he was Leo, from House Plov, a noble family from the Kingdom of Dalan. Abad gave a short, debauched laugh, saying that he was a small fish, stared at Leo for a moment, but then turned to his sister and declared that first place would certainly be his. Celia, irritated by the arrogance, grumbled that those guys were unbearable and that she was going to put an end to their race, without a shadow of a doubt. Just then, someone who seemed to be the organizer of the exam appeared and announced that everyone had gathered. This was Albi Zeron, a teacher at the Lumine Academy. Celia, who knew practically all the important names, was impressed to see him, while Leo, oblivious to the situation, asked who the man was. Celia, indignant at the question, replied that Albi Zeron was a hero registered in the Record of Heroes. Leo thought to himself that this was what they called heroes in that era. Looking at Albi again, Leo noticed something unusual, as a strange mana emanated from the teacher's left eye. Albi began to explain how the test would work, saying that the challenges would be divided into one-on-one duels and monster subjugation, and that each participant would have a turn. After a brief pause, Albi smiled tiredly and said that it was all very tedious. Without warning, he burned the paper with the instructions, faced the students calmly, and took out a book. It was the Record of Heroes, entitled The World of Albi. He opened the book at the prologue called The Wild Forest, and a powerful magic began to emanate from its pages. The surrounding environment was quickly transformed by a magic circle, and the whole place shaped itself into a dense, mysterious forest. Celia, completely distraught by what was happening, shouted that Albi hated inefficiency, but that this was already too much. Albi ignored the commotion and declared that she was going to combine all the challenges into a single test. Leo watched intently and thought seriously as the scene unfolded, remembering the words of his old teacher who had told him that the Record of Heroes was not just a book, but something with real value and real power, because it manifested the world of a hero and contained all the experiences he had lived through. What's more, anyone who entered this world could inherit the power of a hero from the past. Leo reflected that this was a training method designed for heroes. However, before he could deepen his thoughts, a strong light enveloped the entire area, and all the students were transported into the wild forest. Albi, watching from outside, announced that everyone had arrived in the forest and explained that the objective was simple, that they had to survive, form alliances, fight each other, or face the dangers of the environment, doing whatever was necessary to continue, and that anyone who wished to give up could just break the orb in their hands and return to the real world. Finally, he declared that the challenge had begun. Leo looked around, observing the dense forest, and muttered that nothing had changed. He thought to himself that this place had once been home to the elves before it was corrupted by the witch queen Salatna. Suddenly, a student shouted in despair that this was too much and immediately broke the orb in his hands, disappearing from the scene. Another student, with a debauched tone, commented that it was all just an illusion, calling his classmate pathetic. But Leo thought more seriously, reflecting that everyone was wrong, because that world had been created from Albi's real memories, and that everything there was real, including the threats, which could even kill them in the real world. Leo barely had time to react when a spear passed inches from his body, thrown with precision by someone who was rapidly approaching. To his surprise, it wasn't a monster, but a person, or rather, an opponent. It was Chelsea Llewellyn, who was already teaching teasing him, saying that it would be great to eliminate someone from the Zerdinger clan. Leo sighed and replied that, once again, they were confusing things, as he was a Plav. Chelsea ignored the correction and said that he was still on Celia's side. Without giving any room for explanation, Chelsea summoned her wind scythe. Leo watched intently as she activated the spell and thought that the spell hadn't existed in the past, but that the basic structure didn't seem to have changed. He drew his sword and assumed a defensive posture. Chelsea, with a teasing little smile, asked if he was still so relaxed. She then began to swiftly spin her scythe, unleashing a powerful attack in his direction. Leo deflected it easily, which left her visibly surprised. Chelsea thought that he had blocked that attack very easily, but what intrigued her even more was the fact that she couldn't feel any aura emanating from him. She wondered if his aura was simply too difficult to detect. Leo, however, sighed again and said that the attack had been too simple, suggesting that perhaps they should join forces, since whoever survived the longest would gain the most points. He tried to convince her by saying that, as she was a mage, all she had to do was pass the test. Chelsea laughed debauchedly and replied that, unfortunately for him, she was a battle mage. Visibly annoyed, she asked if he was saying that her attack had been simple. Leo calmly replied that, compared to the potential she could have shown, yes, that attack was pretty straightforward. This infuriated Chelsea even more, and she shouted that he couldn't dare speak like that, let alone teach magic to someone like her, a direct descendant of the Llewellyns. Without wasting any time, Chelsea grabbed her staff and summoned several wind spells in quick succession. But the next thing she knew, Leo was gone. He had moved too fast, and she couldn't even feel a trace of mana coming from him. Suddenly, Leo appeared in front of Chelsea and attacked her with a direct physical blow. In the next instant, his scythe and staff flew through the air, and Chelsea fell to her knees completely unarmed. Leo, still calm, held out his hand to her and repeated the proposal, asking if it wouldn't be better if they joined forces. Meanwhile, outside the magical world, the audience was following the broadcast of the exam. When the image finally stabilized, everyone was shocked by what appeared on the screen. Chelsea Llewellyn was tied to a post, while Leo, with a little smile on his face, lit a fire around her. Night had fallen, and the fire was already high, spreading warmth and illuminating the room. Chelsea woke up to the heat and, upon realizing the situation, went into despair and shouted to ask if Leo had gone mad. Leo, as calmly as he could, replied by asking if she was going to cooperate or not. Chelsea, still indignant, shouted that she would never do that because she didn't need anyone but her brother. Trying to break free, Chelsea invoked a wind spell, but it was immediately blocked. Leo commented in an almost casual tone that it was a magic restriction spell, and said that it was pretty cool. Inside, Leo thought that his body didn't have that much mana, and that the spell probably wouldn't last long. Chelsea tried to force herself free, saying that she didn't need magic to get rid of it. Leo, without missing a beat, asked her if she really thought he would let her concentrate enough for that. Then he slowly began to loosen the ropes, letting Chelsea slip closer to the fire. The flames began to touch her dress, and Chelsea panicked. She desperately shouted that she would cooperate. Leo didn't seem satisfied and asked if she would swear on her family name. Chelsea hesitated for a moment, but eventually gave in and swore on the Llewellyn family name. Finally, Leo untied Chelsea completely. When she fell, he caught her in his arms before she touched the ground and said with a sarcastic tone that it was a pleasure to meet you, mage of the Llewellyns. Meanwhile, at Lumini Academy, the teachers were watching the broadcast with rapt attention. Professor Albi Zuran was watching everything with great interest and commented that everyone was following the same pattern as always, fighting each other like a bunch of idiots. He pointed out that only 2 people had understood the real purpose of the test so far, namely Celia Zerdinger and Abed Llewellyn. However, his eyes soon turned to another unexpected duo who were working together to take down a creature. Albi recognized that this was Leo Plav. He analyzed the situation and thought that Leo didn't seem that strong at first glance, and that he didn't have Abad's natural charisma or influence either. Still, the boy had managed to convince Chelsea Llewellyn to join him, and that had caught the teacher's attention. Back in the forest, Leo and Chelsea were working together. Chelsea eliminated one creature with a wind arrow, while Leo slashed the neck of another with his sword. After the battle, Chelsea commented that, come to think of it, having a knight on the front line wasn't so bad. She then looked at Leo and asked curiously what kind of aura he was using, since she hadn't been able to detect anything up to that point. Leo replied simply that he didn't know anything about aura. Chelsea, intrigued, asked what that meant, wondering if he really didn't have an aura. Leo shrugged and said that, for him, a good foundation was more important than aura. He then asked her if she knew what the foundation of wind magic itself was. Challenged by the question, Chelsea decided to test it out. She cast a wind spell with great force, and when it hit a goblin in the path, it destroyed it immediately. Chelsea, irritated by Leo's attitude, shouted that he was being too insolent by talking about wind magic in front of a Llewellyn. Leo responded calmly, saying that she shouldn't shouldn't take it the wrong way, because he recognized that she was really powerful, and there was no denying that, but she was still using magic the wrong way. Chelsea glared at him with irritation, but before she could react, Leo stopped and asked for silence, because he had sensed something different in the air. They began to approach a strange area where there were several bodies on the ground, and Chelsea observed that they looked like mummies. Leo, with a serious look on his face, replied that he had seen victims like that before. He thought to himself that he had understood the conditions of the past reproduced in that test, and that those situations were exactly the same. The next moment, something hit the room, and Leo acted quickly, dodging it and saving Chelsea from being hit. Just then, two people appeared ready to attack, commenting on how close they had come to defeating them. But before they could do anything, Leo reacted quickly. One of them, a man with an axe, lunged at Leo but was knocked down in seconds as Leo used his keen instincts to neutralize the enemy. Soon after, they realized that they weren't alone, as an entire group had surrounded them. Leo looked at Chelsea and firmly told her to cover the rear. Chelsea, impressed by Leo's speed and skill, positioned herself to help him while he showed that he was getting more and more tired of the situation. After a while, the only one still trying to escape was Galivian, and Leo was determined not to let it end like that, as he still had to find another group. As he ran, Leo passed Celia, who saw him and shouted that they should go in that direction. When Leo and Abad arrived on the scene, they found a veritable massacre of creatures. Chelsea, on seeing her brother, called out loudly to him. Abad, with a reassuring smile, replied by saying that it was great to see her well. Celia looked at Leo curiously and asked why the two of them had come together. Leo smiled and replied confidently that it was he who had suggested they cooperate. Celia, still skeptical, commented that Chelsea was too stubborn to accept that, but Leo shrugged and, with an enigmatic smile, said that he had convinced her his way. Leo then began to lift up the bodies of the defeated enemies, showing that, even in the midst of the chaos, he was still in control of the situation. Chelsea asked why he was helping the enemy, and Leo replied that they didn't need to fight anymore, because now the goal was to end that world. Surprised, Chelsea asked what he meant by that, and Leo explained that there was an anomaly in the forest, and that those bodies were as if something had sucked the life out of them. Leo also pointed out that there were very few monsters in the area, and Celia agreed, saying that it was as if the monsters were afraid of something. Leo suggested that perhaps a high-level creature had appeared and scared off all the monsters. Abad concluded that the first major effect caused by Albie had probably been to defeat the most powerful creature in the forest. At that moment, Leo felt a huge presence spread through the forest, and the others felt it too. Leo commented that the creature had finally revealed itself. Meanwhile, Galivian walked alone through the forest, lighting the way with magic. He told himself that, no matter how long it took, he would get Leo out of that place. However, as he continued on his way, he saw something on the path and was startled to notice a body. Galivian fell to the ground and, feeling something strange, realized that he was being covered in a sticky goo. It was the saliva of a gigantic spider that was above him, about to devour him. Meanwhile, at the Lumine Academy, the group of people who had already left the test were talking amongst themselves, trying to count how many participants they had eliminated. And some said they had eliminated 15 or 16. Albie, observing everything, said that all 5 of the people gathered there had failed. A new person approached Albie and said that he needed to approve at least 100 people, otherwise it wouldn't make sense in front of the other regions. He was informed that, at the moment, only 50 people remained in the test. Albie replied that if the candidates didn't meet his standards, they would still fail. He recalled that Headmaster Kalyan had put him in that place for a reason, as he believed that a true hero could only be discovered in difficult times. Albie then turned her eyes to Leo Plov, recognizing that he had noticed the anomaly in the forest, but wondered if Leo would really be able to overcome the world he himself had created. As the group continued to run through the dark forest, they commented on how the atmosphere was becoming increasingly dense and gloomy. Celia stopped suddenly and warned them that there was something ahead. Using her aura to light the way, everyone came across Galivian being devoured by a giant spider. Astonished, Celia asked what kind of creature it was. When Abad prepared to attack, Leo stopped him and shouted at Galivian to break the crystal, because if he didn't, he would die. Galivian heeded the warning and broke the crystal in time to escape from the creature's mouth. With the way clear, Abad finally attacked the spider and caused enormous damage, but not enough, as the creature began to regenerate almost immediately. The group was startled by the spider's regeneration, but Leo remained calm, as he already knew that this was the spider princess, the tarantula. Just then, a man with an axe tried to attack, but was easily thrown away. Celia declared that she would finish the creature off in a single attack, activated her power of prominence, and fired a high-precision blow at the spider's head. However, at the instant of impact, the creature regenerated completely. Celia, surprised, said that this was impossible. Abad stood up and explained that the difference between the destructive power of a knight and a wizard was like day and night. He then cast his wind spell, Ray Fell, creating a giant tornado above above the spider that began to pull in everything around it and tear the creature's legs apart. But even after the attack was over, the spider was still in one piece. This time, the creature went straight for him. Chelsea tried to cast a spell to protect him, but ended up hitting Abad in the arm. Luckily, he didn't suffer any serious injuries. The rest of the group was completely shocked to see that the creature had monstrous regeneration. The tarantula ran straight towards the group, and Leo explained that she was the daughter of Sela, the queen of Tartarus, and that the creature had come from the army of Erebos and invaded the elven forest. The group was confused to hear about Tartarus, and Leo thought silently that the mana in Albi's left eye, the same one he had noticed earlier, was undoubtedly the mana of the Fairy King. Leo went on to explain that the tarantula fell on the forest like a curse, destroying everything and killing almost all the elves. The few survivors asked for help from the Fairy King, who used all his power to defeat the creature. Leo remembered that it was Luna who had killed the spider on that occasion, but apparently the Fairy King's power that was trapped inside the creature, especially the ring of life it had swallowed, was what had allowed it to return. Abad then said that if that creature was the key to completing the test, he would be responsible for defeating it. Celia declared that it wasn't just Abad who could do this, and with that, everyone went after the spider with a combined attack. The creature was hit from all sides, but Leo warned that it would keep regenerating until everyone's mana ran out. Soon the group realized that nothing they were doing was effective, and the spider regenerated completely once again. Confused, Celia asked what Leo was suggesting. He replied that two people needed to work together on the front line. Abad refused, saying he wanted to be MVP, but Celia said she would take the lead. Leo warned them that if they didn't defeat the spider, the world of Albi would be destroyed and they would all fail the test. This made the group apprehensive. Abad said that even if they worked together, they wouldn't be able to kill the spider in one go, as it would always regenerate. Celia also thought about it. Everyone then looked at Leo, and he said that he could solve it. Celia said that would be suicide, as he could barely use an aura. Leo replied that he knew that, but that he could buy 5 minutes. Abad asked what would happen if the plan failed, and Leo replied with a confident smile, taking the other fighter's axe and saying that he didn't think that would happen, as fire and wind had always been good allies and worked well together. Celia and Abad stared at each other as the spider went straight for Leo. He remarked that it reminded him of old times and began to tackle the creature with his axe, cutting each of its legs with precision and force to gain time. The group watched, impressed by Leo's skill, as he continued to attack without hesitation. During the battle, Leo said that it had been a long time since he had faced a monster from Tartarus. Just then, a memory from the past came to mind. An elf child was running desperately through the forest, trying to escape from the tarantula until she got caught in a web. As she was about to be killed, she thought that would be the end of her. But when she looked up, she saw light, and it was a heroine approaching to save her. The heroine shouted at the creature, saying that it had dared to attack her homeland and devour the Fairy King's right hand. With that, she cast a powerful life-type spell and caused a huge explosion on the battlefield. The heroine, surprised, commented that she had never imagined that Erebos would have so much influence in the world. Soon after, Kyle appeared and asked if the child was all right. Back in the present, Leo reflected that this was his limit, as he wouldn't be able to do any more damage without an aura. Suddenly, he called out to Chelsea and asked her to use her magic to launch all the floating weapons in his direction. At that moment, Leo had to dodge an attack from the tarantula, while Chelsea worriedly warned him that he would end up hurting himself if he carried on like this. Leo replied that he would take all the guns and asked her not to worry. Chelsea asked him which weapon he wanted, and he replied that any would do. She then began to use her wind magic to throw the weapons. Leo, noticing the sound, concluded that she had chosen a sword and a scimitar. Leo grasped both weapons with ease and began to perform double attacks, combining strength and speed with precision. After a while of intense combat, he asked Chelsea for another weapon, who, with her wind magic, threw several weapons in his direction. Leo proceeded to use all of them, testing which had the greatest effect on the tarantula, while Chelsea watched him, impressed by his technique, thinking that, despite his age, he looked like a true martial king. Abad also commented that Leo was definitely not a small fish, and at that moment, Leo received a cut on his face. He thought, determined, that if he couldn't stop that insect in this life, his friends would laugh at him in the afterlife. Leo smashed another weapon into the creature and asked for the next one, but Chelsea warned him that it was the last one. He asked why she hadn't said that before, but Celia, already prepared, declared that she was going to finish the creature off. She used her flaming power toward the tarantula, causing the creature to start burning and scream in pain. After some time of intense flames, the ring of life fell out of the spider's stomach. The creature was finally defeated, and the prologue to the world of Albi, known as the Wild Forest, came to an end. Celia sat on the floor, exhausted, saying that it was finally over. She thought to herself that Leo had really held the creature for 5 minutes, and reflected that he was impressive. Just as she was about to praise him, Chelsea interrupted her, shouting that he had done a good job and that it had been incredible, completely enthralled and comparing Leo to a hero from the stories of old. Chia, curious, said she wanted to learn more about hand-to-hand combat and begged Leo to train her. Celia, overhearing this, Riley commented that she hoped she could endure at least one session of Leo's training, saying in a tone laden with difficult memories that only someone who had been through it knew what it was like. Meanwhile, Leo picked up the Ring of Life from the ground and wondered if it was still intact. Suddenly, a small fairy emerged from inside the ring. It was Prince Silid. Leo looked at him and asked if he remembered him, saying that it was Kyle. Silid just smiled quietly before going back inside the ring. Leo concluded that Silid had succeeded in becoming the king of the fairies, and that thanks to the treasure found by Albi, the Ring of Life, he had also obtained the Eye of Mana. Soon afterwards, the system voice announced that the condition to complete the test had been met, and that in 5 seconds, everyone would be transported back. Before that, a mysterious figure appeared in front of Leo. He seemed to recognize that presence, but before he could say anything, everyone was pulled back to reality. Elsewhere, an old man was watching the completion of the Western Territory test. This man was the director of Lumini Academy, Kalian Badian. His secretary, surprised, asked if the test had finished yet, saying that the other territories were still far behind. She then wanted to know how many students had passed from Albi. The director replied that, considering that Albi was responsible for creating the test, 40 passes was a high number. The woman, confused, said that 40 was a lot of people, but Kalian calmly replied that he had only expected 10. The secretary then commented that the first place had probably gone to Abbott or Celia, and the director said that it must have been a difficult decision. He then mentioned that there was one person recommended directly by Albi, which impressed the secretary. She asked if Albi had really recommended someone personally, and the director confirmed it, saying that it was a name he had never heard before. Curious, the woman insisted on seeing the name. Meanwhile, on the test field, the remaining students were arguing in groups, divided between rooting for Celia or Abad, as if they were organized supporters. But Albi kept his eyes fixed on Leo. After much thought, he decided to recommend Leo Prov as the representative among the newcomers. The principal, upon seeing the name, showed interest, saying that if Albi spoke so highly of someone, that boy must be really special. He then read out a message left by Albi in which it was written that Leo possessed the talent needed to become a hero. Later, in a completely different location, Leo was relaxing in a jacuzzi, soaking in the warm water and feeling relieved for the first time after the race. He commented to himself that the pain needed to be treated well and that it felt really good. As he soaked his body in the hot water, he began to think about the mysterious figure he had met at the end of the test. He remembered the message he had received, saying that his reward would be the promise of the Fairy King. Leo reflected that, as a hero in his past life, he deserved much more than a simple promise. But for now, he would accept that consolation reward. Suddenly, Leo heard a strange noise and wondered what it was. When he looked in the direction of the sound, he saw his mother coming in. Leo was completely surprised and speechless when he saw his mother enter. Reina looked at him seriously and started talking, asking him if he knew why she had been expelled from the Zerdinger house. Leo was shocked, as he had never heard of this before. Reina then explained that during a mission to rescue a companion, she had ended up losing the Zerdinger flames, but she had never regretted the decision she had made, because she believed that protecting someone was more important than preserving power. And now she wanted Leo to use that power and continue the legacy she had been unable to maintain. Before leaving the room, Reina congratulated her son on getting into Lumini Academy. Later, Leo finally arrived in the city of Lumeria, a completely futuristic place where magic and technology coexisted in harmony. As he exited the portal, he heard a warning for everyone to collect their belongings before leaving. Admiring the stunning landscape in front of him, Leo commented to himself that this was the center of the world, Lumeria. In the distance, he could already see the imposing Lumini Academy, and his heart filled with anticipation as he walked through the busy streets of the magical capital. As he walked, a figure approached and said that it had been a month, and Leo, surprised, recognized that it was his uncle Zeiss Zerdinger, who had come to congratulate him personally on his entry into the academy. Leo, curious, asked if that was all he had come for, and Zeiss smiled as he replied that House Zerdinger had been involved in an endless debate over the last month. Leo asked if it was a consensus on the Breath of the Phoenix, and Zeiss confirmed it, explaining that although Reina was no longer officially part of the family, Leo was her son, i.e. a direct descendant of the Zerdingers, and that the elders were deeply impressed by the way he passed the test. Zeiss then handed Leo a subspace key and explained that he was now allowed to use it. Leo concentrated his magic on the key, and a magical lock appeared before him, opening like a suspended window. Out of it came a floating book, a sealed artifact that would teach him everything about the techniques of the bloodline. Zeiss instructed Leo to drop a drop of blood on one of the book's blank pages. Leo bit his own finger and let a drop fall. As soon as the blood touched the paper, a powerful magic built up inside the book, activating its contents. Zeiss explained that from that moment on, only Leo would be able to read that artifact, and that mastering the Zerdinger techniques would not be easy, but he trusted that Leo would succeed. Finally, Zeiss congratulated him on becoming the newest member of House Zerdinger. Later, Leo was walking along Lumeria's busy promenade, thinking that this was the place where he should meet Celia. While he was thinking, he bumped into someone, knocking over all the books they were carrying. It was one of those classic encounters worthy of the start of a novel. The girl in question was shy, wore glasses, and hurried to pick up the books while apologizing for not paying attention on the way. As he helped her, Leo saw something lying on the floor, her ID. He read the name and saw that it was Chloe Mule, a newcomer to Lumane Academy. Soon after, Leo entered the store where he had agreed to meet Celia. As soon as she saw him, Celia impatiently asked what was taking him so long, saying that they still needed to buy uniforms, books, and various other things. Leo replied casually that he had had a meeting with his uncle Zeiss. Upon hearing this, Celia became excited and asked if they had reached a consensus. In response, Leo used fire magic and activated a powerful aura around him. He smiled and asked if that answered the question. Celia, completely shocked, let everything she was holding fall to the ground. She babbled that it had taken her weeks to learn the basics of that technique and that Leo was a monster. Later, at the port of Lumeria, a huge ship was docked, and the students looked on in awe at its colossal size. Suddenly, a man appeared behind the group, startling everyone with his sudden presence. He introduced himself as Professor Aina Landiu, in charge of the novice knight class, and said that everyone should get on board immediately, as they were on their way to Lumen. He also repeated his name and title, informing them that he was the Glacial Knight, an official teacher at Lumane Academy. The ship was sailing out to sea, and the students were enjoying the banquet on board. However, Leo and Celia were standing apart from the group, not interacting with anyone. It was then that a man approached them with a relaxed smile and asked if the couple would like a moment to talk. Celia, surprised by the term, repeated the word couple out loud without understanding. The man introduced himself as Carr Thomas, an alchemist from the kingdom of Moira, and explained that he sold potions, weapons, and other items, handing them an elegant business card. Leo, finding the man interesting, also introduced himself as Leo Plav from the kingdom of Delan. Thomas then commented that it was impressive to see representatives from the western region showing respect. Even so, Leo, uncomfortable, wondered if Thomas didn't find it strange that the trip was too quiet for a group of Lumine Academy students. Celia tried to reassure him, saying that it was a warm welcome and that this kind of quietness shouldn't be taken for granted. Leo then glanced discreetly at the teacher standing in the corner and, after looking again at the card he had received, concluded that there was still no real reason to worry. The next instant, the ship began to shake violently, and Leo commented that it was taking too long. A huge tentacle emerged from the water and began attacking the ship, breaking structures and opening holes in the sides. People started shouting for help, but the professor calmly declared that would-be heroes should be able to deal with the situation on their own. Just then, a huge kraken-like creature emerged in front of the ship, ready to attack. Leo immediately drew his sword and told Celia to keep her guard up. Celia, already prepared to fight, cut off a tentacle and told him not to worry about her. The kraken, feeling threatened, splashed water in Celia's face, and Leo naturally explained that this was normal, as the creature did this when it felt intimidated. When one of the tentacles grabbed a student by the leg, Leo and Celia ran together to cut it off and free the student. Meanwhile, Carr Thomas hid terrified under a table, commenting that it was natural to see Celia fighting with such skill since she was the best in her region. But he wondered who that boy was, surprised by Leo's strength. It was then that a tentacle in front of Thomas was suddenly frozen, and he shouted for them to be careful. Leo realized that the one who had cast the magic was Chloe Mueller, the shy girl he had met before. She was protected by a magical barrier and was attacking the kraken with ice spells in sequence. She asked why Leo didn't protect himself with barriers like the others, and Carr Thomas watched on, commenting that strong people like Chloe didn't care who was around when they went into combat. Another tentacle fell in front of Leo, this time cut by Abed Llewellyn, who appeared with his sister Chelsea. Abad declared that the competition wasn't over yet, and Celia replied that she felt exactly the same. Chelsea only smiled slightly at Leo, with a shy look on her face. Meanwhile, Professor Ayn Elendieu remained calm, sipping his wine elegantly. He commented that there were many creatures in the Lumine Academy lake and that the Kraken was ideal for a welcome event. The professor reflected that everything was going according to plan, with the best from each region facing off against the creature. He cited Chen Xia from the east, Celia Zerdinger and Abed Llewellyn from the west, Chloe Muller from the north, Walden Thyden from the south, and Duran Moira from the center. Even with so many talents at work, the teacher thought that it was Leo who impressed him the most. He noticed that Leo's movements were precise, without waste, as if he could predict the creature's attacks. The professor smiled, planning to put Leo to the test soon. When the ship finally arrived at Lumine Academy, everyone was exhausted after the confrontation. Carr Thomas, relieved, commented that he had finished all the potions he had brought. Professor Ainalandio got off the ship and warned the students that they would have to cross the lake frequently, so they had better get used to it. Soon afterwards, everyone was taken to the entrance hall of Lumine Academy. The first stop was the Electra Training Center, where the veterans watched the newcomers explore the campus. They commented to each other how nice it was to see so many interesting people that year. The entrance ceremony began shortly afterwards. The teacher ordered everyone to organize themselves by region, with the best placed at the front of the line. The director of the academy would soon appear to give a speech. When the principal began his speech, he said that everyone had finally arrived at the academy with the hope of becoming a hero. He said that there was only one thing to say. If they really wanted this path, they had to give it their all, put their lives on the line and go beyond their own limits. Those who couldn't do that, he said, didn't deserve to be there. After saying this, he hit the ground hard, creating an impact that made everyone tense up. Afterwards, the director himself wondered if he hadn't overdone it. Someone shouted at him about it, and the students began to think that the more they got to know the principal, the more his reputation crumbled. Just then, the newcomer's representative was called up to speak, and everyone was surprised to see who it was. Some were confused, others indignant, but the name announced was Leo Prof. He took to the stage with his book in hand, and looking out into the audience, saw Albie smiling at him. Leo wondered if it was Albie who had personally recommended him. While the students murmured, wondering who that unknown boy was, Leo stood his ground. He began his speech by telling the veterans and teachers that, as of that day, the freshmen and newcomers were officially entering Lumine Academy as proud members of its ranks. Leo's speech continued, but the scene was cut before he had finished speaking, much to the relief of the ceremonialist, who thanked him silently for doing so. Leo introduced himself as the freshman representative, saying that his name was Leo Plov. Upon hearing this, some of the veterans thought that he sounded polite and that perhaps this new generation was calmer. But Leo, in a moment of audacity, left a direct message for everyone, saying that if anyone wanted his place, they could come and take it. The reaction from most of the students was not good, and Leo added that it didn't matter who they were, they could all have a go. Later, at sunset, in the dormitories of the Lumine Academy, the students would receive their final instructions before going to bed. From the next day, for about a week, exploratory classes would begin, where each student could try out different classes before choosing the 3 that interested them most. Everyone went to their dormitories and started packing. Leo stayed in room 302, and soon discovered that his neighbor in room 303 was Carr Thomas. Thomas, excited for the next day, wished Leo goodnight, who said goodbye and went straight to bed, still wearing his clothes and shoes, completely tired. As he lay there, Leo reflected in silence on what he wanted to find in Lumine. In his mind came the image of a huge stone pillar rising above everything, representing astral knowledge and absolute power. Leo thought that he wanted to find his own hero's record, because he didn't believe that his story deserved to be forgotten in the past. The next morning in the cafeteria, Thomas appeared excited and sat down next to Leo. Leo, as calm as ever, said that everything was fine and that he could sit down. Suddenly, someone banged on the table and called Leo the freshman representative. Leo, already used to it, commented that this was where the trouble started. The boy was Duran, who wanted to know what Leo had meant by those provocative words the day before. Leo replied that it had indeed been a provocation, but that he couldn't help it, since a complete stranger had shown up trying to pick a fight with him. Duran, irritated, asked if Leo knew who he was, saying that he was the captain of the Central Region. Thomas and Leo, however, continued eating without caring, which made Duran even angrier. Thomas thought that the situation had now become serious. Duran, overcome with anger, kicked the table, sending the food flying. But Leo calmly and quickly caught all the food in the air and put it back on the plates. He piled the burgers on Thomas's tray and said it was unforgivable to waste food like that. Duran replied that he would knock Leo off that horse he thought he was on. But suddenly someone put a hand on Duran's shoulder. It was Professor Ainalandieu, who hugged them both and commented that he was curious to see the captain of the Central Region and the freshman representative in action. Duran was confused, wondering when the professor had arrived. The teacher, smiling, said that fighting on the first day showed that they were ready for what came next. Later, in the Knights department, the students were already gathered, and one of them asked asked why they were there. If class hadn't even started yet, Celia looked around and wondered where Leo was. At that moment, Leo and Duran arrived on the scene, completely exhausted, but Leo seemed less affected. Celia approached and asked what had happened. Duran, humiliated and tired, tried to explain, but Leo just said that this was no time for explanations. Professor Aniclimax appeared shortly afterwards and, seeing that everyone was already present, announced the start of the lesson. He officially introduced himself as the teacher of the freshman nights class. Duran glared angrily at Leo, but Leo didn't even look at him. Thomas, watching all this, thought that a war had already started on the first day. The teacher then began to explain about the 3 types of powers derived from mana: magical energy, soul energy, and aura. He explained that, of the 3, aura was the most difficult to master. He asked the students if anyone knew why. Celia replied that the aura lost mana flow during conversion. The teacher complimented her, saying that she was absolutely right, and explained that, unlike the other forms, the aura absorbs mana rather than using it directly. He then concentrated his aura and asked why it was used in this way inside the body. Celia wondered quietly if the aura didn't leave the body naturally, but Leo replied that the aura burns mana like fuel. The teacher confirmed this and asked what the most important thing was when burning mana. Leo replied that it was stamina. The teacher, impressed by the answer, asked if Leo had studied this before. Leo said no. The teacher thought to himself that it was rare to see a student of that age understanding the essence of aura so well. Soon after, the teacher told him it was time to move his body. He gathered his energy, and everyone was amazed to see him float lightly, as if he were stepping on the wind. He explained that this was the aura step, a basic technique that consisted of concentrating the aura in the legs, and stressed that the most important thing was the infinite potential of the aura's applications. As the lesson went on, the students tried to imitate the movement and practice with their own techniques. Celia commented to Leo that she would teach him how to use his aura, saying that she would do it like a devoted little sister. Leo, indifferent, replied that he was fine for now, but the teacher looked at Duran, who was accumulating his mana in a suspicious way, and smiled. In a loud voice, he called the class to attention, saying that everyone knew there had been a bit of a mix-up that morning. Chelsea looked confused at the commotion and wondered what exactly they were talking about, and Thomas, standing next to her, replied that Leo could tell her. The teacher then called Leo and Duran to the front of the class and asked Duran what had made him so angry. Duran replied that he wasn't angry, but the teacher told him that he needed to get in line, and, without further ado, announced that the 2 of them, as representatives, would have a head-to-head competition to decide who would be the true representative of the class. The teacher explained that they could use aura without restrictions, which surprised even Duran himself. Thomas, excited, began to narrate on his own, saying that it was the duel between the genius of House Moira, the master of the lightning aura, against the mysterious black horse who had suppressed all the regional captains, Leo Pluff. The students began to argue animatedly, betting on who would win, and the teacher explained the winner would be the one who crossed the finish line first. He also stated that the loser would have to accept the result, as that was chivalrous. Celia thought that realistically, Leo wouldn't stand a chance, but she knew well the kind of person he was and knew that he always exceeded expectations. At that moment, Duran began to gather his electric aura, creating sparks around his body while Leo just took off running on his own legs. Duran declared that he would win and actually began to pull away easily because of his aura, with the students commenting that, as expected, he was leading. Leo, on the other hand, was clearly falling behind, but he was concentrating on his feet as he ran with absolute focus. Chelsea, contrary to the comments around her, was discreetly cheering him on. Duran was past the halfway point, and Thomas watched with concern until Leo did something unexpected. He stopped in the middle of the race, looked away, and ran towards the wall. Celia, confused, wondered what that idiot was trying to do, but soon saw Leo concentrate his red flames on his feet and scale the wall with ease. At the top, he built up so much energy that he cracked the ground and used the resulting explosion as momentum. The impact created a wave of energy that launched him like a rocket towards the finish line. In mid-flight, Leo shouted to Duran that he was now going to take the lead, calling him an asshole. With that, he passed Duran at high speed and crossed the finish line first. Duran was so shocked that he stopped running. Leo just smiled and looked at the crack he had left in the ground with his momentum. Everyone was amazed, wondering what had just happened, as he had overtaken the fastest first-year student without even fully mastering the aura step. Seeing all this, Celia thought that it wasn't just an aura, it was the Phoenix. Chelsea and Thomas celebrated excitedly, saying that Leo was incredible. The professor, for his part, reflected on Duran's technique, remembering that his specialty was the electric aura, which usually increased speed dramatically. Even so, Leo managed to beat him, which was unexpected. Leo, on the other hand, thought more strategically and accumulated his flaming aura in his feet, creating his own version of the aura step. The teacher considered it a brilliant application. Leo approached Duran and held out his hand, saying that it had been a good race, and even commented that if the race had been a little longer, longer, he would have lost. But Duran, visibly humiliated, refused the handshake and left. The teacher observed everything and concluded that finally, in that generation, a true hero had been born. Chelsea went up to Leo and said that what he had done was impressive, which was why she wanted to train with him even more. Thomas asked Celia why she was acting like that with Leo, and Celia replied that she thought it was obvious. Thomas then suggested they all go to a cafe to relax and said he would pay, but Leo apologized, saying he wouldn't go, and left in silence. Thomas asked where he was going, and Leo replied that he was going to attend the summoning class. Thomas was confused, wondering why a knight would be interested in that, and Celia had no idea what Leo was planning either. As he walked, Leo thought silently that there was still something he didn't understand. He wondered why the Fairy King had given him that reward, remembering that in the world of a hero, rewards are compatible with the hero's strength. Leo suspected that his reward had something to do with summoning. Normally, Albie didn't deal with spiritualism, but to make a contract with a fairy, Leo would need to go to Fairyland. As he made his way to class, someone came up behind him asking if he was also going to the summoning class. Leo looked and recognized that it was Chen Xia, captain of the Eastern region. She introduced herself politely, and Leo replied that it was a pleasure to meet her. Xia said she was sure Leo was from the Night Division and asked why he was going to that class. Leo replied that he was interested in spiritualism. Xia then commented that they would see each other more often. Leo asked which spirit she had a contract with, and Xia showed him her water spirit. She then asked if Leo already had a spirit, and he replied that he hadn't completed the contract yet. Xia said that if he needed help, he could count on her. Leo replied that he could count on her, but asked how old she was. Xia replied that she was 17, and Leo was surprised, thinking that she looked even younger than Chelsea. At that moment, Xia stared at him and asked if he had thought of anything rude. Leo quickly denied it, saying that he hadn't thought of anything. Xia, while keeping a firm gaze, said that, in any case, she found what Leo did against Duran very impressive. Leo, curious, asked if she had watched it, and Xia replied that she had and that she was really impressed. She then challenged him to a fight between them, asking him to accept her challenge. Leo, with a half smile, replied that it was fine, and that he didn't see a problem with it. Later, in the summoning division, the atmosphere was different from the other classes, with fewer students, but they all looked dangerous. Walden, the leader of the South, was present, as were Xia and Leo. Leo observed the group and asked if that was all there was to it, and Xia replied that summoning wasn't that popular a choice. Leo said he had expected that, but asked if the class would be held outdoors. Just then, a large flying creature descended from the sky, flying straight towards one of the students. It was a wyvern, and it was the class teacher who was riding it. The creature approached one of the students, who backed away in terror, but the woman on top of him shouted that the wyvern had taken a liking to him, and that he shouldn't scare the creature. She then introduced herself as Yura Marine, the summoning teacher that year. The students were enchanted by her appearance and striking presence. Leo remembered an old friend who was sure to make overly romantic comments about her beauty. Yura then called them all big-headed and said that if they were there, it was because they already had a talent for summoning, so they wouldn't waste any time and would go straight to practicing. She called Carlo, the first-year associate professor who appeared holding a griffin, and soon other griffins began to approach the group. Yura explained that everyone would need to form pairs and ride the griffins. The students hesitated, saying they had never ridden one before, but Yura said that sounded like an excuse from someone who didn't want to take part. She herself got on her wyvern and told anyone who didn't want to take part not to show up. The wyvern flapped its wings, creating a great rush of wind across the plains. Then it took flight, and Carlo encouraged all the students to follow. Gradually, the students began to mount the griffins, albeit with difficulty. One boy tried unsuccessfully, while Sia asked if she could take the reins. Leo said it was fine, and that she could do as she liked. They began to fly over the Great Lake of Lumania Academy, and the scene was reminiscent of a great adventure, like something out of a legend. The students were amazed to be flying, and Sia commented that, although she had been worried at first, the griffins were kinder than she had imagined. Leo replied that, even so, it was good to be careful, as griffins could be difficult to control the first time. As soon as she said this, the teacher blew a whistle, causing all the griffins to become agitated. Leo explained that the griffins had been following the teacher's command up to that point, but now they were going to act on their own. Yura shouted that if they wanted to be called Lumaine Academy students, they should be able to control a griffin. Even Xia began to struggle, and Leo hugged her to help her stay in the air. She was visibly embarrassed, but Leo explained that griffins were very proud creatures, and that trying to dominate them by force would only make everything worse. He held Xia's hand carefully and told her to take it easy. Together, they managed to stabilize their flight and even flew past their teacher. Yura, still mounted on the wyvern, looked at Carlo and asked if Leo was really a knight. Carlo nervously looked at the papers and said yes. She asked if he had a history with griffins, and Carlo said no, which led Yura to conclude that this was pure talent. She then thought that perhaps a jewel was hidden in that class. Later, the students arrived arrived at the island of Invocations, the discipline's training center. Most of them were exhausted, but Leo seemed calm, exploring the area with curiosity. He saw a laden tree and noticed a huge fruit. A feather had fallen on it. Zia approached and asked what he was looking at. Leo picked the fruit and gave it to the griffin, who ate it with satisfaction. Yura then announced that they would be taking a practical test. One of the students protested, saying that it was still the exploratory period. Yura replied that, compared to the knight and mage classes, summoning was a much longer path. She asked if they knew why. She then explained that it wasn't enough to control mana. You had to have the affinity to make a contract with a spirit, and the skill to tame the creatures. For this reason, summoner heroes were few and far between, but those who did exist could achieve much more than the others. Yura asked if everyone was there for that reason. A prominent student came forward. Her name was Elisa Hergen, a renowned summoner from the Hergen family, and she asked what the exam would be. Yura replied that the island was full of summoners and that each student's duty was to tame one of them and bring it back. After that, they would make the contract. She commented that the process was easy enough, and most of them were excited about the chance to get a summon for free. Everyone ran excitedly through the forest, but Leo remained still. Elisa approached and said that rumors had spread about him defeating Duran. She asked what he was doing there, and other captains also showed curiosity, but Leo didn't explain anything. He just walked away, saying he would do his best. Elisa was visibly annoyed by the way Leo walked away without explaining anything, while Yura watched the remaining students carefully and thought that, without a doubt, those four would be the best summoners that year. She felt this strongly as Leo walked through the forest alongside the other students, exploring the terrain and trying to find a suitable summon. Her classmates watched Leo from a distance and murmured among themselves, impressed that he was the freshman representative, but at the same time wondering why he was there, since they doubted his summoning skills. Some even commented that if he got a 0 on the test, he would return to the knight's class with his tail between his legs. But when he found himself completely alone, Leo pulled out the feather he had found earlier. With serious eyes, he channeled the power of the phoenix, and the feather began to burn in his hands. Leo muttered that everything was unfolding exactly as he had predicted, but his thoughts were interrupted by an unexpected sensation. Elsewhere, Raina Pluff was having a quiet meal, and Zeiss noticed that she looked worried. She didn't know exactly why, but her heart sensed that something important was happening. Back in the forest, Leo was enveloped by an intense heat, even without being directly hit by the flames. He recognized that kind of fire and remarked in a low voice that it was one of the 3 great summonings of Phoenix. The flames began to talk to him, saying that they smelled Zerdinger and that they were expecting something more grandiose. The voice of the fire mentioned that it smelled Raina, and Leo, surprised, asked if the flame knew his mother. The fire confirmed that it did, that Raina was his mother and that she owed him an old favor. It was then that the Phoenix revealed itself. Her name was Farina, one of the 3 great summonings, and she introduced herself imposingly. Leo also introduced himself, claiming to be Leo Plav, and asked what Farina's relationship was with her mother. Farina explained that Raina had saved the life of her summoner, Ellen Lunda. Leo was surprised to hear Ellen's name, and asked if she was the heroine Ellen. Farina confirmed it, saying that Ellen had lost all her companions while clearing a dungeon, and that, on the verge of losing her own life, she was saved by Raina, who at that moment sacrificed her flaming Zerdinger aura to protect her. Farina explained that this was the reason Ellen had failed to become a great heroine, and that Raina had never regretted her choice. Leo commented his mother had said exactly that, and Farina smiled, saying that Raina was that kind of knight. Leo then asked why Farina was in Lumine, and the Phoenix replied that she couldn't reveal that. But then she returned the question, wanting to know why Leo was there if he wasn't a summoner. Leo explained that he was also attending summoning classes, and Farina was surprised, observing his body attentively, and saying that the destiny he carried was very interesting. She then said that now she could finally repay her debt to Raina. She asked Leo to reach out and touch the flame in front of him. An ember appeared, and from it an egg was born, which appeared directly in Leo's hands. Farina explained that this was her son, and that she hoped that one day Leo would make a contract with him. Leo, without hesitation, asked if he could make the contract right then and there, which astonished Farina. She warned him that it was too soon and that he might die in the process. Even so, Leo began to concentrate the flaming power around his body. Farina remarked that it was reminiscent of Raina defying death with a smile. Inside his mind, Leo found himself enveloped in darkness, where there was only a small ember. He gripped it tightly, and the flame exploded all over his body. Leo thought that the heat of a phoenix was brutal, and that the users of this invocation endured the pain of being burned every day. After all, the phoenix is an immortal being that regenerates from the ashes eternally. Leo now understood the pain and decided to join in. With effort, he managed to control the flames that swirled around him, and the phoenix egg began to crack. The contract began, and the energy in the egg was so powerful that the shell spell could barely contain it. Farina, watching, asked if he had really succeeded. Leo confirmed it, and Farina smiled in admiration, saying that he was a true genius. She said that Leo would be the greatest summoner the world had ever seen, and congratulated him on making the contract. The child's name was Fiora, also a phoenix, one of the 3 great invocations. Farina, assuming her human form, looked at Leo with affection and asked him to take good care of her daughter. Leo looked at Fiora and thought she looked more like a chicken chick. Fiora, with sparkling eyes and a cute expression, looked at him curiously. Leo silently accepted that, yes, it really was a chick. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the students were returning from the forest with the invocations they had tamed. The teacher asked Carlo how much time was left, and he replied that there were only 5 minutes left. Only 4 students had not yet returned. Suddenly, a large creature appeared walking towards the field. It was a bear with glowing eyes, ferocious in appearance, but which turned out to be completely tame. Sitting on it, with a firm posture, was Zia. The teacher was surprised and asked if she had tamed an aquatic bear cub, praising her for the feat. Then another student returned with a winged creature. It was Walden, carrying a dark crow. The teacher said it was impressive, and Walden explained that he hadn't done the contract yet, but had managed to tame the creature. Soon after, Elisa returned, carrying a huge white snake that was crawling silently beside her. The teacher looked at the snake Elisa had brought and identified it as a Gorgon snake. Curious, she asked why she had chosen that creature. Elisa replied naturally that she found the snake beautiful, and that until now, there had been none like it in her family's lineage. The teacher was silent for a moment, but Carlo soon told her that the time for the test was up. Just then, the last student finally appeared, walking calmly onto the field. It was Leo, and on his head was Fiora, the little phoenix cub who had just been born. As soon as they saw him, several students started laughing. They commented to each other that it was ridiculous to see a knight in a summoning class, joking that he could only be useless. But unlike her classmates, Professor Yura felt something strange, and a shockwave went through her body. Silently, she thought that the boy had gotten a phoenix. Later, back at the academy, Leo walked through the corridors until he stopped in front of an office door. He was going to meet Professor Yura. When the door opened, Yura appeared in a lighter, more comfortable outfit and asked him to sit down. Leo settled into the chair while Yura, with a smile, commented that this was the first time she had seen a phoenix baby with her own eyes. She said that she didn't even know there was a phoenix on Summoning Island, and that a freshman hiring one was unprecedented in the academy's history. Leo, confused by the teacher's behavior, asked what she was doing. Yura approached him, and Leo began to feel apprehensive, wondering if she had discovered that he was a reincarnation. But suddenly, Yura threw herself on top of him, her breast pressing into Leo's face, and enthusiastically declared that he was a genius, a true summoning genius, and that she was thrilled when she heard he had gotten a phoenix. Soon afterwards, Yura pulled himself together and said that it was better to keep it a secret for the time being. She explained that if the information spread so soon, it would cause an uproar. She then firmly asked that, at the end of the exploration period, he choose the summoning class as his main one, as he had the talent to become the greatest summoner in the world. Early the next morning, Chloe was walking through the corridors of the academy, yawning. Thomas saw her passing by and commented that if she kept yawning like that, her mouth would break. Chloe replied that she had been up reading magic books. Just then, Leo approached and greeted her, asking if she really was Chloe Mueller. He then gave her back her ID, lost on the day of their first meeting. Chloe thanked him, calling him the freshman representative, but also asked why he was going to magic class. Leo replied that he was still in the exploration period and that he was there to explore other classes. Thomas, sitting next to Leo, commented that that woman was probably the most powerful mage in the division, Chloe Mueller. Chloe cast an icy glance in his direction, and Thomas, sweating, tried to disguise it by saying that the atmosphere had suddenly turned cold. Before he could escape, Chloe created a huge pillar of ice in front of him and called him to sit in front of it with her. While Chloe forcibly dragged Thomas away, Leo was left alone until Chelsea appeared. Right behind her came the Llewellyn brothers, waving familiarly. Seeing them, Leo thought he had forgotten for a moment that they were there too. Just then, the teacher of the magic class entered the room and introduced himself as Len Horse. With a serious look on his face, he told the freshmen that before they started their exploratory class, there was something important to be done. With a snap of his fingers, he conjured a spell that made papers appear in the hands of each student. He explained that this was a theory test in magic, and that any student who failed the test would not be welcome in his class. He added that if they were at Lumine Academy, they had to live up to the standard it demanded. He then pointed to the assistant sitting in the corner of the room and said that when they had finished, they should give the test to Anna. Leo looked at the test and broke out in a cold sweat. He thought those formulas were absurdly complex and that this was modern magic. He shivered as he tried to understand the content. The time for the test began to run out, and the tension in the room increased rapidly. The students were all concentrating, but you could see the desperation on their faces. Leo, meanwhile, was staring at the paper in front of him, feeling sweat trickle down his forehead. He thought that he hadn't solved a single question so far and that he clearly wasn't prepared for this kind of test. Determined, Leo got up, left the room without saying anything, and walked through the corridors of the academy, promising himself that he would learn on his own, even if it was slowly and alone. When the test time was up, Professor Len snapped his fingers good-naturedly, making all the tests fly back to him in a single magical movement. He then manifested a magnificent power above the room, an ethereal glow reminiscent of the stars in the night sky. He explained to the students that this was the power of the stars, the essence of a magic that he himself had created, something that went beyond common knowledge. Len then looked at everyone and said that the real aim of the test was to make each student think about their own magic, because he wanted everyone there to create something new. He explained that the first 49 questions were just memorization, but the last one, which was worth more than half the test, required each student to understand the essence of magic. Chelsea, upon hearing this, was surprised and commented that it now made sense that the last question was the only one she couldn't answer. She then looked around the room, noticing that no one was there, and asked where Leo was, wondering if he had given up, and concluding that perhaps he really didn't fit in well with magic. It was then that Assistant Anna approached Len and said that one of the students had managed to solve the last question. The teacher's eyes widened, he laughed out loud, and excitedly asked the person to stand up, saying that he wanted to know who had done it, because it was the first time in history that someone had solved that question. Len was excited, saying that he would have to rethink his assessment method, but that it was great because it showed real talent. However, Anna interrupted him and said that it wasn't quite like that. She explained that the student had only solved the last question and none of the others. The teacher, confused, asked how this was possible. Anna then revealed that the student's name was Leo Pluff. Len was completely shocked, looked around the room and called out Leo's name, but realized that he wasn't there. Zia then raised her hand and explained that Leo had left after handing in the exam. The teacher was even more impressed, repeating to himself that the only one who got the 51 points on the last question had already left. Later, in the cafeteria, Celia laughed at the story. She said that Leo had left the room after solving just one question and getting a mark for only that. Still laughing, she teased him by saying that he had gotten a summoning in the shape of a chick and had barely understood the magic test, so it would be better to focus on fencing, which was what he knew how to do. Leo, unperturbed, calmly asked if she would like to train with him. Taken by surprise, Celia stuttered and tried to back away, but was interrupted by a presence behind Leo. It was Professor Leon, now with a stern expression on his face. He asked if Leo was really Leo Pluff, the knight who had dared to make fun of the magic class. Showing irritation, Len asked why Leo had left after solving just one question, wondering if he thought the test was too easy or not important enough. Leo stood up seriously and replied that the teacher was getting it all wrong, because he had found the test extremely difficult and really believed that he hadn't managed to pass. Intrigued, the teacher asked how he had solved the last question. Leo explained that he used to study from old books found in his family's house, and that he wasn't familiar with modern magic, but the ancient fundamentals helped him understand the concept of the last question. Hearing this, the teacher cracked a huge smile, got completely excited, and, without thinking twice, picked Leo up like he was a stuffed toy. Leo, startled, wondered what was going on while the teacher shouted for him to come with him immediately. Without waiting for an answer, Len ran off down the corridors of the gym, dragging Leo along absurdly. His assistant Anna ran after him, desperately trying to keep up. Meanwhile, Celia, watching the scene from the cafeteria, crossed her arms and commented, still surprised that this was definitely not normal. Anna stopped for a moment next to Celia and asked if she had seen where they had gone. Celia calmly pointed to the corridor and replied that she had, and that the teacher was running with Leo in his arms, as if he were a rare prize. Anna sighed deeply and started running again, muttering to herself that this man was impossible and that no one knew what he was up to this time. Back in the magic room, Professor Len, already visibly excited, erased some of the content from the board and began to write something completely new. Professor Len tapped the board enthusiastically and asked Leo to solve the problem he had just written down. He watched intently because he wanted to confirm whether Leo really had the ability or whether he had solved the last question of the previous test just by luck. Leo, still a little confused by everything, looked at the board for a few moments in silence and then commented that he had already solved it. Professor Len, curious, went to look at what Leo had written and was completely shocked as he realized that Leo had solved all the questions mentally without even writing down the steps. Len, still incredulous, muttered that it was almost right, and then started laughing to himself, completely elated that he had finally found what he was looking for. Meanwhile, in the corridors of the academy, Professor Albie was walking calmly until he saw Len running wildly towards him. Albie, noticing, turned his face away and muttered that he was coming, trying to get away from him. But Len quickly grabbed grabbed Albie's leg, thanking him repeatedly for the recommendation. Albie, not understanding anything, lifted Len by the collar and asked why he was so excited. Len replied, with his eyes shining, that it was because of Leo Pluff, the magic genius that Albie had recommended. Albie paused, confused, remembering that Leo was a knight, not a wizard. Len shook his head vigorously, saying that Leo needed to become a wizard, whatever the cost. Before Albie could react, Anna came running down the corridors, shouting for Professor Len. She saw him floating in Albie's arms and ran to him. When Albie let go of him, Anna caught him before he fell to the ground, thanking him for arriving in time, but then glaring at him angrily. She said they had to get back to the room, thinking to herself that one day she would kill that lunatic. Shortly afterwards, Albie saw Leo approaching and, with a slight smile, simply turned and walked away. Leo, watching the whole scene, just thought that the wizards were still the same, all completely lunatic. A week passed, and on the last day of the exploratory classes, Leo was sitting quietly in a corner, reading his book. When he closed the book, the title could be seen. Kyle was either a hero or a fraud. Leo then got up and went to the roof, from where he observed the chaos below. Several people were running towards the principal's office, and the principal, seeing the commotion, didn't understand a thing. The three main teachers, Elandieu, Len, and Yura, were there, all arguing. Elandieu shouted that it was unacceptable, as Leo's record showed that he was enrolled in the academy's three main classes: knights, wizards, and summoners. While Len and Yura started arguing among themselves, Elandieu told the principal that Leo should be at the military academy, not there, calling him too much of a special case. The director started laughing, saying that it all reminded him of a fictional hero. When asked which one, he replied that he was the fifth grade hero, also known as the hero of the beginning, Kyle, the only one in the history of mankind who had mastered the three main classes. Later, at the training center, Celia and Chelsea were killing themselves in the exercises, running non-stop, while Thomas watched, confused, and asked why they were training so much at the weekend. Leo replied that it was Chelsea who had asked to train with him. Thomas then asked why they were running without weapons, and Leo explained that there was something more important than weapons. Celia added that stamina was the most important attribute for a battle mage, which was why they were doing that training, asking Thomas to step aside. Celia sat down next to Leo, who offered her a bottle of water. Chelsea commented that training was going very well, and that she also wanted to run with Leo. Upon hearing this, Celia choked and started laughing, spitting out the water she was drinking. Leo said that he was already planning to run with Chelsea, so everything was fine, but Celia said she wasn't going to run with him at all. Thomas, curious, wondered why Celia and Leo seemed so close, and even thought they were boyfriend and girlfriend. Celia replied impatiently that he was her cousin, the son of her paternal aunt. Chelsea and Thomas were confused, asking if that was right. Celia explained that technically it wasn't, that it was a matter of family circumstances, but that it wasn't important. Leo then stood up and said they could start training. Chelsea was excited. Thomas, realizing that he wasn't part of it, decided to go and explore the city of Lumeria, wishing them a good training session. Celia then desperately got up and asked to go along, and Thomas wondered why he was always in the middle of such strange people. On the day of the final allocation of classes, Leo entered the room of class number 5. Thomas was already waiting for him. Leo asked if Thomas already knew that he would be there, and Thomas replied that there was nothing he didn't know. Leo was surprised and asked if Chelsea was also in the room. She was, exhausted from training. Thomas watched the two of them and wondered what exactly they had done over the weekend. Shortly afterwards, someone passed in front of the room, mocking class 5, calling it the class of anguish. One of the students commented that they would be leaving the academy before the end of the semester. Another offered his condolences. That's when a strong presence approached. An imposing man appeared and asked if the students were sorry. He said that in fact, there were two people much more worthy of pity there, and as he approached, everyone saw his intimidating expression. He asked if they disagreed. That man was Herod Edmund, head teacher of the 5th grade class. He entered the room and ordered a chair to be placed. The students fearfully turned their chairs towards him, and Herod sat cross-legged on them, saying that it was good to meet those sacks of shit. He explained that this class was for failures, for those who had gotten the worst grades of all the freshmen. They had certainly heard rumors about him, and he introduced himself as the Wailing Wall. Herod then asked if anyone knew why he had been given this title. Thomas replied that it was because he raised the students' grades. Herod laughed and replied that that was a typical response from someone who came last, calling Thomas by name. He then asked if anyone knew what the real duty of a Lumini Academy student was, especially as part of a lower class. When Herod asked what the duty of a Lumina Academy student was, Chelsea raised her hand firmly and replied that it was to capture the hero's world through practice missions. Herod confirmed that this was the right answer, and looked looked around, observing the faces of the Class 5 students. He said that everyone there had the expressions of people who would die immediately on entering the real hero's world, and added, "Fiat, it was better to be expelled from the academy than to actually die." For this reason, he personally decided to take charge of Class 5, earning him the nickname the Wailing Wall. As he said this, he glanced straight at Leo and thought that the boy would probably survive. Then he ordered everyone to put on their exercise clothes and go to the training ground, because it was time for combat studies. While the students were training in the bright sun wearing light clothes, Herod was lying quietly on a beach chair under a parasol drinking coconut water. He said that this class was to correct the wrong mentality that everyone had developed before entering the academy. Herod asked who would save each of them in real life, where lives come and go so easily. A student called Nella Carven raised her hand and replied that it would be her companions. Herod then replied that no, the only thing that could save them was their own ability. He said that only when their own abilities shone through in the midst of danger would they be able to start thinking about helping others. He looked at her again and asked if she was confident that her colleagues could protect her. When Nella answered yes, he asked her to show her skill as a magical knight. Eliana Leiden, who had the knight and mage classes, created a simple fireball. Herod asked if that was all, saying that with that little fireball she wouldn't even kill an ant. Eliana, annoyed, concentrated more mana and created 2 larger, more powerful fireballs. She asked what the teacher thought, and Herod replied ironically, saying that it was impressive to see that she had doubled the amount in size. Herod then created a sphere of wind and summoned a small fairy, asking it to hit its target. The fairy flew straight to Eliana, started tickling her nose and irritating her with little bumps on her face. Eliana tried to hit the fairy with her fireballs, but couldn't. Herod asked what was the point of creating such a powerful ability if she couldn't even use it properly. He said that everyone needed to understand how unprepared they were, and that until they could understand that, the class wouldn't end. He shouted for everyone to do everything, calling them Lumeni's descendants. Leo, observing everything, thought that Herod's words were harsh but true. He got up and got ready too. Herod watched Leo plov carefully and thought that he really did look like that fictional hero, Kyle. While the other students tried to catch the fairy, Leo prepared himself with his flames, concentrating his aura on his feet. He advanced like a rocket towards the fairy, with blazing steps and eyes fixed on the target. Chelsea, seeing this, asked how he could be so fast, and Thomas said he couldn't even keep up. Leo jumped high and tried to grab the fairy, but she dodged. With a smile, he prepared a skill to trap her, but before he could, Duran appeared and captured her first. He glared defiantly at Leo, and at that instant, a new figure began to applaud. It was Sejin, teacher of class number 1. He said that his students never disappointed. Herod looked at him and asked if he wanted to take over the class instead. Duran, still staring at Leo, glared at Sejin, and the teacher of class 1 clearly didn't like it. Thomas commented to Nella that this was a rivalry between 2 of the academy's greatest pillars. Leo, curious, asked what Thomas meant by pillars. Thomas explained that Herod and Sejin had been working at Lumaine for over 20 years, and that, from what he had heard, Professors Len and Yura had been their students. Nella asked how Thomas knew this, and he replied that he was good with information. Sejin then commented that Herod had no idea what he was up against when he chose to be in charge of the underachievers class. But he would soon find out. He held up a ball and proposed a competition between Class 1 and Class 5. Herod asked if it was a basketball match, and Sejin confirmed it, saying that it was a basketball competition. Herod stood up and laughed, saying that it made sense coming from the genius Sejin, learning by doing. Sejin said that his class would win and accepted the competition. Herod, indifferent, lay down again and said that it made no difference, that he could continue with Class 5. Sejin, unhappy, wondered how he had lost the graduates' vote to that man. Before leaving, Sejin gathered his students together, and Herod turned to his class, saying that this was an opportunity for them to practice their skills. There would be a Bastera match between Class 1 and Class 5. He stood up again and declared that, more importantly, if they lost, they would be expelled. Immediately, everyone was in shock, asking if he was serious. Herod confirmed it, saying that if they didn't want to be expelled, they would have to push their limits. Besides, he reminded them that they shouldn't be so worried. After all, they had the freshman representative on their side, didn't they? He told Leo to choose 6 representatives to go with him on the Bastera. Leo realized that this was clearly a test, but he also understood that the teacher wasn't doing it out of spite. He noticed that many students in Class 5 had lost their motivation, and this competition would be a way to get it back. Herod wanted him to choose the most unmotivated students, to give them a new chance. The match began. While the preparation was taking place, Leo asked why Chelsea was so scared. Chelsea replied that he had never heard of Bastera, a traditional combat sport in Lumine. Thomas explained that it wasn't just a ball game, but a very dangerous one. Someone asked why Chelsea was so scared, and Celia teased her, asking if she already knew she was going to lose. Chelsea turned around crowd and angrily replied that she wasn't the one who was afraid, calling Celia a damn Zerdinger. Just as the two were about to get into a real argument, Leo hugged them both at the same time and called for calm, assuring them that their class wouldn't lose. Celia crossed her arms and firmly declared that Leo would also see the fruit of her training. But next to Celia, there was an even more intimidating presence. Someone that even Sejin was watching closely. It was then that Sejin announced that everyone should proceed to the arena. Leo asked who was going with him, and the first to step forward were Eliana and Chelsea, who looked excited. Other students joined the group, including Nella, until someone commented that the last space was for Thomas, but he was clearly trying to hide. Even so, Leo said that Class 5 was ready. Sejin replied with a smile and tossed the ball into the air, starting the match. Everyone watched, eager to see how Class 5 would do. Class 1 looked confident and well-positioned. As soon as the game started, Duran and Leo ran towards the ball. Duran was quicker, catching the ball first and returning to the ground. Leo ran up to Nella and asked her to explain the rules. Nella said that the aim was to infuse the ball with aura and hit the hoop using hands or feet. The first team to score 2 points won. Tide Marcoa, the blonde of the group, explained the details. Duran prepared for the shot. Thomas was the goalkeeper at that moment. Duran shot with full force, aiming the ball at Leo, who had to dodge to avoid being hit. The ball went straight through the hoop, scoring the first point of Class 1. The crowd celebrated, shouting Duran's name, while Class 5 began to lose confidence. Tide commented that it looked like Herod really wanted to kick them out. Leo asked how they could retrieve the ball, and Tide replied that there were 3 ways: when the ball left the arena, on the opponent's turn, or if someone retrieved it manually. At that moment, Nella shouted, "Dodge!" But Class 5 was taken by surprise. Eliana was hit directly in the chest by a ball thrown by Celia, who criticized her classmates for talking too much instead of paying attention to the game. Tide explained that direct attacks on opponents were not allowed, and that Eliana had been incapacitated by the ball, not by an assault. Leo thanked him for his explanation and said that it was now their turn. With Eliana out of the game, Class 5 was down to 1 player. Sejin observed everything and thought that teams with fire aura users, like Celia, had an advantage in the Bastera. The Zerdinger's flames were particularly destructive. He commented that Herod had accepted the match even though he knew Celia was on the other side, which made the victory of Class 5 unlikely. Herod, however, was asleep under his parasol. Sejin grumbled that he should try to be civilized for once. Herod replied lazily, asking if Sejin remembered his first pupil, a girl from the Zerdinger house. Sejin replied that it was impossible to forget the Queen of the Bastra. Herod then revealed that her son was in Class 5. Sejin was surprised, as he hadn't realized this before. Meanwhile, the students in Class 5 were becoming increasingly discouraged. Many already believed they would be expelled, but they were impressed when they saw Leo stand up seriously, concentrating the power of the Phoenix around himself. He threw the ball like a flaming bullet, aiming straight for the hoop. Chloe, acting quickly, erected a wall of ice to block the attack, saying she wouldn't let the ball through so easily. Leo replied that impossible wasn't the right word. He jumped, extending the range of the shot, and punched the ball hard, completely destroying the wall of ice and sending the ball straight through. Sejin, impressed, thought that Leo's combat instinct was simply incredible. Herod, on the other side of the pitch, gave a small smile. The Class 5 crowd began to cheer, shouting Leo's name. Sejin, smiling, said that now the real game had begun. Bastera's goal was similar to volleyball, requiring a 2-point difference to win. The match heated up, and the score quickly went from 2-1, 4-5, 7-6 to 9-10. Everyone was trying to open up a 2-point lead, but the race was on. When Duran tried to score another point, it was Thomas who intercepted the ball. He held the ball so tightly that he almost burned himself and was electrocuted, but he made it. He was immediately taken off the pitch, and now it was Leo's turn. The match was at its decisive point. Whoever scored the next point would win. Leo stood alone on the court, facing Duran, Celia, and Chloe. He picked up the ball and began to analyze his options, while the crowd commented that he was at a big disadvantage. Chloe said that she had lost to him in the theory exam, but that she wouldn't lose now. She created several ice clones to confuse Leo. Leo crouched down and concentrated. Celia teased him, telling him to come quickly. He then summoned the power of the fairies and disappeared from everyone's sight. His speed was such that he seemed to have vanished. He passed through his opponents as if they weren't there. Celia had no chance to react. Chloe tried to identify the real Leo among the illusions, but couldn't. She realized that this was no ordinary magic. It was the magic of the stars, used by the elves. She was so impressed that she fell to her knees without the strength to continue. Leo scored the final point and secured victory for Class 5. The students began to shout his name in excitement, thanking him for not being expelled. Sejin approached Herod and asked what he had done with those students. Herod replied that he had only given them motivation. Class 1, humiliated by their defeat, lowered their heads, but Sejin gathered them together and told them that it didn't matter. He said that they had all worked together for the good of the class and that they should congratulate their opponents with pride. His words rekindled the group's spirits. Herod jokingly muttered, "Loser, loser, sucker," while Sejin said that both classes had done a great job. Class 1 had shown talent and dedication, and Class 5, despite being discredited, had shown determination and perseverance. They had managed to push their limits and successfully overcome the situation. Sejin declared that he now hoped that the two classes could work in harmony, and the students looked at each other in silence before shaking hands. Celia looked at Chelsea with a tired smile and said that she had done much better than she had expected, that there was nothing to criticize. Chelsea smiled back in surprise, thanking her for the compliment. On the other side, Chloe was sitting, her eyes watering. She felt humiliated for having failed to recognize Leo as someone worthy of attention. Leo approached her, held out his hand and said that what she had done was incredible, and that, with a little more experience, she would become an impressive mage. Chloe looked at him suspiciously and asked if he was making fun of her. Leo just kept smiling and kept holding out his hand. Chloe hesitated, but then shook Leo's hand with a determined look, silently promising that one day she would defeat him. A month later, Leo, Thomas, and Chelsea were sitting together at the cafeteria table. Thomas asked curiously which club they were going to join. Leo unexpectedly replied that he wasn't planning on joining any, as he wanted to create his own club. Everyone was surprised. Chelsea, excited, declared that if Leo was really going to start a club, she would sign up without a second thought. Thomas then asked what the theme of the club was, and Leo explained that he wanted to found the Heroic Research Society, with the aim of investigating more about the lost hero, Kyle, the hero from the beginning. The people around them commented that Kyle was just a fictional hero, but Leo insisted that he wanted to continue his research. Thomas commented that probably no one would join that club, but Chelsea, after thinking for a few seconds, slammed her hand on the table and said firmly that she wanted to join, that her mind was made up. Suddenly, a commotion swept through the cafeteria. Everyone stood up to see the return of the fifth-year students who had gone out to clear a dungeon. It was explained that fragments of the Register of Heroes were scattered around the world, and that sometimes they got out of control, forming dungeons. The older students were responsible for dealing with them, staying away for 2 weeks or even a month. Leo thought that his mother also did this kind of task when she was younger. Chelsea commented that the fifth-year students were the best at Lumen. Thomas began to introduce some of the students, saying that he knew them all. The big guy at the front was called Lee Jamua, the one furthest south was Toru Yan, and the one in the hoodie was called Ulta. But when he looked at the last one, Thomas was confused because he didn't know who he was. People began to move closer to get a better look, and suddenly someone pulled Leo aside. Everyone murmured, recognizing the approaching figure as the president of the student council. Thomas looked back and realized that Leo had disappeared. Leo asked why Celia had pulled him so urgently, and she replied that there was somewhere they needed to go, and that they were going to meet the president of the council in Lumera. Leo asked why the president wanted to talk to him, and Celia explained that he didn't get involved in school affairs, but that she wanted to see him in person. Later, in a typical Asian restaurant, Celia said that she hadn't expected the president to choose that place, but that she was happy to be there. Soon after, they saw who was approaching. It was Reese Zerdinger, Celia's older brother, the president of the Lumine Student Council and a fifth-year student. Reese smiled and said it was a pleasure to finally meet Leo Plov, the boy who wanted to dominate all the classes. They began to eat, and Reese asked if Leo liked the food. He said yes, while Celia was still hesitant to try it. When she finally tried it, she was surprised and admitted that it was delicious. Reese then changed the subject and asked if Leo was their aunt's son. Leo asked if he had ever met his mother before, and Reese said yes, that he had seen her several times when he was younger, and that she was famous at school. Leo was surprised and asked if his mother really was famous. Reese confirmed it, saying that she had broken several records and done legendary things, such as leading a student rebellion against the cafeteria and breaking into the principal's office. Celia, shocked, asked if it was really their aunt who had done it, and Reese confirmed with a smile. After they had finished their meal, Leo thought that it made sense that Reese was the strongest of the Lumen, and that it was only a matter of time before he became a hero. Reese asked if they wanted dessert, saying he would pay the bill while Celia could go ahead. But as Leo walked out the door, Reese noticed something strange. There was a magical glow in Leo's pocket, something that caught his attention. Back in Class 5, Professor Herod had his feet up on the table, relaxed. Eliana asked to be allowed to ask a question, and Herod, with an indifferent expression, told her to ask that pathetic question straight away. Eliana asked why Class 5 didn't have a representative, since all the other classes did. Tide commented that Eliana was right. Herod then replied that he had forgotten that, and declared that Leo was the representative. Eliana asked if there shouldn't be a vote, and and Tide said that it needed to be democratic. But Herod pointed to the pile of paperwork on the table and explained that the representative had to organize it all. He asked if anyone wanted that job, and Eliana quickly sat down, changing her mind. Just then, the school loudspeaker announced that there would be a joint heroic studies class, and all the first-year students should go to the auditorium. Leo asked if Class 5 was going to, and Herod replied ironically, saying that it was a good question for a class representative. Later, the corridors of the gym were packed with students making their way to the auditorium. Thomas and Leo met Chloe on the way, and she looked exhausted. Chloe asked Thomas if he had any fatigue recovery points and said she would pay. Thomas handed over the only 2 points he had, and Chloe drank them all in one go. Leo was surprised, saying that the year had barely started and she was already in that state. Chloe replied that she was fine and walked off. Thomas commented that he now understood why she was the best at magical theory. Chelsea explained that Chloe had no choice, because if Leo got up to speed on magic, he'd end up passing her completely. Thomas asked what was wrong with being second, and Chelsea replied that he was an idiot, because Chloe was a tower wizard. She explained that Chloe was a battle mage, but that her focus was on magical research and the core of magic, linked to the magic towers, linked to the magic. It was her pride that was at stake. Chessa, overhearing the conversation, asked Thomas if he really was a wizard. He replied that he was, and that he used magic for a living, but that his real pride was his magical substances. Just then, a voice echoed from across the room. It was Celia, shouting so loudly that even Chloe, who was far away, could hear. She was shouting angrily at Leo, saying, "Die, kid," while the atmosphere in the academy seemed to change completely. At the same time, in the principal's office, something strange happened. The damaged page of a heroic record began to glow, reacting with intensity, and this immediately caught the principal's attention. The person who had brought the fragment was Reese Zerdinger, who held the object carefully. He explained that the page was so damaged that it shouldn't have reacted at all, but that he saw it with his own eyes when it glowed with unusual strength. The director asked if it had reacted again, and Reese replied that it hadn't since that moment. The director began to analyze the fragment carefully and said that he needed to look into it very carefully. He thanked Reese for his excellent work and dismissed him, saying he must be tired. The principal then called his assistant, Helena, and asked her to take the fragment to the auditorium, where the first-year freshmen were already gathered. The heroic studies class would be starting soon. After Helena left, the principal thought about it, reflecting that if that fragment had reacted, it meant that it had come into contact with the hero related to it. Later, in the auditorium, Professor Artian Nier entered with a strong presence and ordered everyone to be quiet. As the students continued talking, she accumulated magic and shouted for everyone to shut up, threatening to make someone disappear if they didn't pay attention. She even pointed at a student and said, "Do I kill you first, kid?" scaring half the auditorium. After realizing the exaggeration, she took a deep breath and thanked them for their attention, taking back control of the class. The students started whispering, saying that all the teachers at Lumini Academy looked completely scary. Leo thought that Artian was a spiritualist, a rare class, and that in his past life there were very few like her. Artian then announced the start of the heroic studies lesson. She held an ancient blade somewhere between a dagger and a short sword, and explained that, since the heroic records appeared, heroes had begun to form clans, connecting deeply with their records. To open a heroic world, you needed an object strongly linked to the corresponding hero. This made it easier for descendants to access the worlds of their ancestors. She explained that this was why the Lumen Academy preserved the heroic records, and that the ancient families may had deep ties to these records. Perhaps that was the real treasure hidden behind these ancient lineages. Leo found the lesson fascinating, while Thomas slept next to him, not understanding anything. Ardian then asked if everyone understood why these studies were important. It was at this moment that Helena entered the auditorium carrying the fragment. Ardian continued the lesson by saying that heroic studies taught how to solve the challenges of each heroic world, as well as preparing students to face the anomalies found within them. When students reached their final year, they would be allowed to choose a heroic world to explore and purify. Ardian then took the fragment brought by Helena and showed it on the screen for everyone to see. She slowly opened it, revealing the damaged piece, and everyone in the room was impressed. But soon after, she closed it again and said they would talk about it later. She then asked each student to stand up and say what they wanted to achieve as a hero. Celia stood up and declared that she wanted to be a knight so powerful that she would surpass all the generations of the Zerdinger family. Ardian praised her, saying it was a worthy goal. Chloe, more restrained, said she wanted wanted to write a book containing only her own original spells. Other students took turns, and when Thomas stood up, he said that he wanted to be a supporting hero and help others with his powers. RTN commented that this was an extremely valuable and worthy role. When it was Leo's turn, he stood up and firmly declared that his goal was to completely annihilate Aribo. The whole room fell silent. The teacher tried to disguise her shock, saying with a strained smile that it was a very ambitious goal. Some students whispered that Leo was dreaming too big. Sejin asked Herod what he thought of this, and Herod replied that Leo wasn't the kind of person to say something in vain. Thinking to himself, Herod recalled that millennia ago, Aribo was fragmented and sealed, but always resurfaced, bringing disaster with it. And if just one fragment managed to escape, it was enough to cause destruction. He understood that Leo's goal was to eradicate every last trace of Aribo. Ardian then took over the class again, saying that they were going to analyze the fragment of the heroic record they had recovered. Once they had identified which hero it belonged to, they could study how to clean it. She warned them that unexpected situations could arise and that the teachers would be vigilant. The students were nervous, as they knew this was a rare opportunity. Several were visibly anxious, as it was the first time they would be playing a real fragment of the heroic record. Ardian asked the representatives of each class to introduce themselves. Leo, Celia, Abad, and Shia stepped forward. The teacher explained that 2 fragments had been recovered, but they would only use 1 for today's lesson. One of them was quite small, but she explained that even the smallest fragments could contain precious secrets. Leo was chosen to decide which fragment would be used, and he chose the smallest one. The very moment Leo touched the fragment, it began to react with an enormous amount of magic, creating a vortex of energy in the middle of the auditorium. A new heroic world began to open up, linked to an unknown chapter in the record. Sejin, watching the scene, said quietly that this was not good. The first thing everyone saw when they entered was a huge cluster of bodies lying on the ground, and although the scene was frightening, there was also something strangely beautiful about the sight of the dungeon before them. The students were naturally terrified by what they were witnessing, but Professor Herod tried to calm the group down, explaining that this place was a dungeon belonging to an ancient hero. Sadine, observing the scenery, commented that there seemed to be a fortress further on, right in the background, which immediately caught Leo's attention, as he believed he recognized the place. In Leo's mind, images of the age of catastrophe began to form, and he remembered humanity's last line of defense, the ultimate city protected by the walls of Godthron. This memory brought up an old scene, in which someone told Gaius that even if their wish didn't come true, they would still save the world. The phrase was completed by a woman who appeared there, inside the dungeon, appearing like a living memory, like a figure made entirely of magic, and Leo immediately recognized her as Lycinus. As he pronounced her name, everything began to fall apart around him. The hero's dungeon lost its shape and returned to its original state. Chen, confused by what had just happened, asked what it was all about, but Herod, preferring to avoid further confusion, announced the end of the lesson, asked everyone to line up and end the activities there. As the students left, Leo remained still, immersed in thought. He was sure that this was Kyle's record, the page of his story, and now he had finally found it. Herod, curious about the boy's behavior, watched from a distance, without interfering. Later, Eliana was completely surprised to hear Leo relate his experience and asked if he had really seen the King of Wisdom. Chelsea, amazed, commented that she already knew Leo was someone extraordinary and considered that moment a historic event. Helena, for her part, complained that she should have been elected class president, lamenting the missed opportunity, but Thomas quickly countered by saying that she wouldn't stand a chance, which led to a brief fight between the two, with Thomas being lightly hit. At this point, the Herod teacher returned only to remind everyone that this was by far the noisiest class in the school, and that they needed to decide whether they preferred to study in silence or be expelled. That was enough to establish absolute silence in the room. Leo, for his part, was still puzzled. He wondered why his hero record was the only one that looked like a complete mess. Although he had an idea of what was going on, he still couldn't understand exactly where it was or what it meant. The memory of Lycina's and the phrase she had said came back to him with force, as if someone had deliberately destroyed his hero log to prevent him from accessing the truth. He concluded that a hero's register carries the power and heritage of a true hero, and that if someone wanted to prevent the birth of a new hero, they could throw that register into Erebos. The first thing Leo felt he needed to do was find out why the register had been fragmented in this way and who had done it. A month had passed since the event, event, and in magic class, Professor Len was explaining the concept of single magic to the students. He announced that the midterm practical assessment would be based on this content, which naturally made all the students a little nervous and anxious about the challenge ahead of them. Professor Len explained that original magic is a type of magic that clearly reveals a magician's individuality. Nowadays, where activation techniques have become commonplace, magicians don't focus so much on creating original spells. However, he pointed out that original magic can be transformed into a secret technique capable of protecting the magician in critical situations. As an example, he mentioned star magic, a technique that every elf learns, but which is nothing more than a simplified copy of the original magic. According to Len, only one person in history has managed to learn the true magic of the star, the creator herself, Luna, founder of Nebula. While the professor was talking, Chloe was staring at Leo, and he realized that she was using elvish magic. It was then that Leo noticed a book in front of Chloe, a book that radiated a rather evil aura. Chloe, realizing that Leo had seen her, quickly put the book away, and Leo wondered if the object was a grimoire. Professor Len, at the end of his explanation, said that all the students had to discover a unique magic by the end of the semester, and that, for today, the class was over. When Chloe left the room, her face had a heavy expression, as if she was extremely tired. Leo, without hesitation, pulled her by the arm, but she clearly didn't like it. Nevertheless, he simply invited her to lunch. During this brief moment, Leo realized that Chloe was trying to hide the grimoire in her bag. She, in turn, said that she didn't have time for that and that she planned to destroy it in the practical test. That's when Thomas approached, interrupting the moment, and defiantly asked if Leo was really challenging the Queen of Magical Studies. Chloe, with a wry smile, replied that although she had already lost to Leo in technical terms, when it came to magic, she had to win. She said that whatever happened, she would beat Leo in the practical part. Leo, not wanting to let this go unheard, said that if she disrespected him, she would consider it disrespectful, which led Chloe to nod. They both shook hands firmly, and Thomas, watching, thought it was a handshake worthy of respect. Later, Leo was in the Tower of Heroes, thinking about what he could find there. He thought that somewhere in that tower should be Lumine's forbidden library, and if he could find it, he might discover something about her last record. As he walked, a few girls passed him, commenting on whether there were any newcomers there, until a voice called out to him. It was Toru Ayan, a fifth-year student from Lumine's magic department. She said that Professor Rain had talked a lot about Leo and that it was nice to meet him. Leo, always polite, complimented her on her experience and the fact that she was a senior. However, Toru Ayan blocked Leo's path and asked what a first-year student was doing in the Tower of Heroes. Leo naturally explained that he was there to talk to the president of the student council. She then suggested that if Leo joined the magic department, he would have the chance to talk to the president. But Leo replied that it wasn't necessary, as he already attended classes in that department. Toru Ayan, with a slight smile, allowed him to pass, but before he continued, she said that she hoped Leo would choose his major in the magic department before the end of the semester. She ended the conversation with a thoughtful look, making it clear that she hoped he had understood the message. Leo silently nodded and then went up to the tower's elevator. However, when he pressed the button, he realized that the elevator wasn't working. Leo pressed the button over and over again, but someone approached him and told him that he needed to put his hand on the button. The person introduced himself as Lee Jamua from the Knights Department, 5th year, and commented that it was a pleasure to meet Leo Pluff. He also mentioned that Leo was the first-year class president everyone was talking about, and asked what exactly he was doing in the Tower of Heroes. Leo explained that he had business with the chairman of the board, and Lee Jamua commented that Leo didn't seem to be afraid of him, which made him quite handy for surprise visits to the office. Lee Jamua suggested that Leo consider joining the Knights Department, but Leo, with a chuckle, replied that he wasn't the first person to make that suggestion. When Leo finally arrived at the student council president's office, he knocked on the door and introduced himself. The president, who was Celia's brother, turned out to be Riss Zerdinger. Leo dryly said that he would like access to the forbidden library. Riss, with an understanding look, replied that she knew Leo wasn't the type to mess around, but explained that there were 2 ways for an ordinary student to gain access to that library. The first would be to complete the Dungeon of Heroes, and the second, rarer, would be for the conqueror of the dungeon himself to personally return the pages of the hero's record. Leo, curious, asked, "So what?" Rise replied that she would only tell him the second way after he joined the student council. Later, while on his way to the Knights Department practical exam, Thomas excitedly commented that the day of the duel had finally arrived. He joked that he couldn't watch a match like this without some popcorn since he was selling popcorn. Chelsea, with a smile, observed that Thomas was really excited about his business, while Eliana commented that this was very normal since she would also be trying to make money even if she wasn't in Lumnia. Leo thought that Chloe probably wouldn't show up, but the first duel was already starting. It would be Hal Naive from Class 1 against Leo Plav from Class 5. Thomas, excited, noticed that Professor Sejin was running towards him and jokingly asked if he would like to buy a bucket of popcorn or a drink. Sejin, with a wry smile, asked if he really thought he would buy that, and then suggested he ask Herod. Thomas stared at Celia, and then she asked if the teacher couldn't buy some popcorn for them since it was so good, and everyone began to feel the tension in the air. Thomas, with a smile, replied that he could buy a popcorn for each of them, and this gave the group a little relief, but soon the tension returned as the fight was about to begin. Leo, looking confident, said that luck was on his side and that he would be the first to fight. Hal Naive, with a defiant tone, commented that it seemed Leo didn't care about his power and would soon regret it. The Knights Department's biannual practical exam was a test consisting of duels, where each student had to win 5 battles to pass. The aim was to determine who would be the most powerful representative of the class. Some commented on Leo's abilities, saying that he was only taking 3 subjects, which made it hard to believe that he had such powerful strengths in all of them, suggesting that he might be weaker in the area of chivalry. Hal, on the other hand, was considered the 3rd best in his class, just behind Celia and Duran. During the duel, Hal thought of Leo Plav, the arrogant boy who was always around Celia, and knew that this would be an interesting confrontation. Elandieu, who was observing the situation, said that the duel should be treated like a battle royal, where the winner would be the one who managed to make the opponent surrender. Meanwhile, Leo felt a sinister presence and evil energy emanating from the academy, which made him even more alert. Meanwhile, Chloe was in a corner of the academy, studying intensely but very frustrated. She knew that with the skills she possessed, she wouldn't be able to create a single spell capable of defeating him. In a fit of rage, she threw the grimoire away, determined not to lose to Leo. She thought that, with the power of the grimoire, she could win, and she would do anything to achieve victory. Leo, still feeling the evil energy, was worried, but soon concentrated again. Taking advantage of the gap Hal had left when he approached with his spear, Leo easily dodged the blow. Hal, snake spear in hand, aimed directly at Leo's chest, but Leo managed to hold on to the spear with one hand. Surprised by Leo's strength, Hal wondered what kind of power he possessed. In one swift movement, Leo pulled out the spear, bringing Hal close to him, and with a powerful punch hit him in the face. Hal was thrown to the other side of the battlefield, and Leo teased, wondering if he wasn't the careless one there. Hal, now furious and determined, replied that Leo shouldn't think himself so arrogant, because the real duel was just beginning. Hal Naive commented that Leo couldn't use aura, saying that just because he had a lot of strength didn't mean that his biggest weakness had been solved. Leo calmly replied that Hal's poisonous aura was indeed peculiar, and then used his flaming power. Hal, with a dismissive smile, said that if Leo's flame aura wasn't on the same level as Celia's, it wouldn't impress him. Leo confidently said that Hal was constantly being careless, because in the blink of an eye, he was in front of him without Hal realizing it. Leo exuded an immense amount of flaming power, making even Duran pay attention to the fight. Chelsea, on the audience side, was cheering, while Celia watched with concern, wondering how Leo had managed to increase the power of his flame aura so much. Hal realized, with some surprise, that Leo's aura was even more powerful than Celia's. He wondered if Leo had mastered all of them. He wondered if Leo had mastered all the classes and was really that good at all of them. Hal said that he only wanted to use that power to defeat Celia, not expecting to have to use it against a loser like Leo. Hal then used his poisonous snake ability, which wrapped itself completely around Leo's body, ready to swallow him. Meanwhile, Hal looked at the audience, wondering what Celia would think of this skill, a technique he had learned precisely to destroy Celia's flames. Celia calmly asked Hal to look back at Leo. To everyone's surprise, Leo was melting the poisonous snake, evaporating it until it exploded in several directions. Hal, incredulous, lunged at it with his spear, but Leo finally drew his sword and returned the blow. Leo, with a defiant smile, warned Hal to pay attention to the fire, or he would end up getting burned. The fight ended with Leo Pluff as the winner. Chelsea, delighted, commented, "As expected of Leo." Thomas, smiling, said he knew he would win. Hal thoughtfully acknowledged that Leo was really good and now understood why he was on the same level as Celia. Celia, approaching Leo, said that he was incredible, which made Leo a little shy. The next fight would be between Eliana Leiden and Shania from Class 10. Eliana was shocked to see that Shania was among the best 3 students. Shania, with a respectful smile, bowed to Eliana, wishing her good luck. However, Eliana, undaunted, acted respectfully. When the fight began, Shania immediately used water magic, while Eliana doused her body with flames. Eliana quickly got on top of Shania, and Leo, watching, thought that it would really hurt. In fact, Eliana crashed into a powerful water barrier and was easily pushed away. With that, Shania was declared the winner. Eliana, with a smile, commented that it wasn't such a bad defeat. Leo, observing the situation, said that the duel was already lost for Eliana, but that it could could have changed if she had fought more strategically. The next fight would be between Celia Zerdinger from the first class and Duran Moira, also from the first class. Celia Zerdinger smiled, saying that the fight would be fun, but Duran Moira didn't reply. Thomas, relaxed, was stuffing himself with popcorn, while Leo, with a watchful eye, commented that this fight would indeed be interesting. The audience, just sensing the power of the two, was impressed. Celia then declared that it was time to see who really was the better student. Duran, as always, was economical with his words and threw the first blow, but Celia easily blocked it. The audience was dazzled by the powers of the two. Thomas, curious, asked Leo who he thought would win. Leo, smiling and taking the popcorn from Thomas, said that from what he could see so far, Celia was going to lose. However, on closer inspection, he realized that Celia's gaze was full of determination, and she would give anything to win that fight. Duran, taking advantage of his high speed, charged at Celia, managing to cut her face slightly. The battle continued with a rapid exchange of blows, and Celia intensified her firepower. She created a great storm of fire, a veritable flaming tornado. Leo, watching, commented, "That's her initial move." He explained that the freshman training camp was very small, and realizing this, Celia knew that Duran wouldn't be able to keep up with her speed, and decided to dominate the battlefield. Now he would have the disadvantage, since moving in the flames would make it difficult for him to see. Duran was strong, but in that environment, he was no longer at such an advantage. Duran, distracted by the heat and flames, didn't notice Celia approaching him from behind. When he finally tried to dodge, Celia grabbed her sword and, with a smile, declared, "Now I've got you." She headbutted him, causing Duran to faint. The audience went wild, and the winner was Celia Zerdinger. Celia, smiling, commented that Duran should train his strength more. Even though he was still a bit dizzy, Duran stood up and shook Celia's hand, showing respect. The audience soon started shippering the two, joking that they made a great couple. Leo, with a mischievous grin, commented, "Looks like the training paid off for Celia." Professor Herod, who was watching the whole thing, also appeared eating popcorn and praised Leo's comment, saying that he had really enjoyed it. Thomas, surprised, asked, "When did you get here?" The teacher just laughed and said that he was always around. With that, the practical test of the writer's studies came to an end. The results were as follows: Celia Zerdinger with 4 wins and 1 loss, Duran Moira with 4 wins and 1 loss, Shania with 4 wins and 1 loss, and Leo Plav in first place with 5 wins and no losses. A week later, during the language exam, Professor Herod entered the room and said that everyone had done a good job, but now it was time to try their hardest to avoid failing and being expelled from the academy. He slammed the door and left, making the students nervous. Eliana, grumbling, commented, "This guy only talks about expulsion." Meanwhile, everyone was trying to stick it to Chelsea, and Leo was lying down, almost dozing off. Nella, worried, asked Leo how he'd done in the exam. Leo, with a carefree smile, replied that it hadn't been that bad. But Nella, observing his face, asked, "You who can do everything look like that?" Leo, laughing, asked, "Ass." Nella offered her help, saying that she could use healing magic to diagnose Leo, as he was complaining of neck pain. Thomas, who was also in a lot of pain, joined in the conversation, saying that his neck pain was unbearable. Chelsea, wasting no time, slapped Thomas on the back of the head and commented that this should be enough to relieve his pain. Chelsea then changed the subject and asked about Leo's practice of invocation. Tide, visibly irritated, replied that Leo didn't show up for invocation classes anymore, but Leo explained that he was practicing on his own, in his spare time. Chelsea, curious, asked what position he hoped to achieve in the invocation test. Leo confidently replied that the position was simple: he would come first. On the day of the invocation race, the event was announced with enthusiasm. The narrator, Lumba Tess, a third-year summoner, welcomed the newcomers to the big event, the Summoners Race. Celia, with a puzzled expression, asked if this was really a competition, and Riss explained that the Summoners Race was a well-known academy tradition, also used for friendly duels between academies. Thomas, as always, was there, selling popcorn. Tide asked the audience to be quiet, clearly irritated by the noise. The pressure on the summoners was evident, with many of them visibly stressed. Eliana was among the observers, staring at Leo, while Chelsea and Walden were also present. Elisa, with a worried expression, commented that Leo had done well in the knighting competition, but she hadn't seen him training for the summoning competition. Leo confirmed that he was preparing, but Elisa and the others began to question whether he was really ready, saying that if he was going to take it all as a joke, he should just give up. When the competition began, everyone realized that Leo had only summoned one chick, which led to laughter and negative comments from the other summoners, who didn't hesitate to call him a fake. Tide, trying to calm things down, asked the audience to calm down. Some students, however, continued to jeer, saying that Leo was only there because he was in the same class as them. Chelsea, sensing the growing tension, commented that the atmosphere was really uncomfortable. It was then that Senliu appeared, observing the situation and commenting that Chelsea had done very well in the night competition, which explained her lack of concern about the invocation competition. Chelsea was visibly annoyed by Senliu's attitude, and Walden was also irritated by the noise, saying that if anyone was going to take sides over the summoning time, they'd better get out of his way. Senliu, confused, asked what Walden meant by that. Walden replied that if Sen thought he was so superior, he'd better keep quiet, as there were many people better than him there. Senliu, with a defiant smile, asked if Walden was offended and touched on the wound, questioning whether he had trained before arriving. Walden angrily replied that he saw no reason to train against someone like Senliu, especially an idiot who couldn't even control a griffin. Senliu, furious, went to punch Walden, but Leo intervened, holding his arm firmly. Leo calmly warned Senliu that if he was going to fight before the race, he should be careful, as he could be disqualified. Tide, observing the situation, commented that the atmosphere was not good. He explained that in summoning competitions, the difference in power between the more experienced summoners and the novices was quite clear. Leo and Chelsea, who didn't focus on summoning, were almost at the top of the rankings, which created even more tension among the students. The second-year students started bad-mouthing the invocation class, especially Leo, spreading rumors that he didn't participate in practical training. Leo realized that the hostility towards him was growing, and now he understood that his presence there was being seen as a joke. Meanwhile, a hooded individual in the lecture thought to himself that the competition had finally begun. He then retreated through a portal. At the same moment, Senliu seemed to be possessed by an unknown force, with thoughts of destroying everyone around him. Lumba, the narrator, then announced that, before the start, he would explain the basic rules of the event. The students, he explained, would only be able to summon during the test, and the use of aura and magic was completely forbidden. When the test began, the participants would need to pick up the griffins in front of them, pass the island of invocation, and take a walk around the Lake of Silence. After clarifying the rules, Lumba asked the competitors a question: who would be the highest scorer in the race? Everyone was apprehensive, especially the competitors. Professor Yura, seeing the nervousness of the newcomers, tried to calm them down, saying that they shouldn't worry, they should act exactly as they did in training. Those who hold back will be left behind, she warned. However, her words had the opposite effect and made the students even more anxious. She then instructed them to get ready for the start of the race. Meanwhile, Senliu and another student seemed to be up to something, because when the test started, they used aura and magic against Walden and Leo, with the intention of taking them out of the competition. Leo, however, protected himself easily. Tide, worried about the representative, looked at Leo, but Leo reassured him, telling him to relax and move on. Tide, still worried, went on his way but kept looking back. In the audience, the murmur of discontent grew, with some spectators calling the situation a joke. Leo, thinking about what was going on, realized that he knew they didn't like him, but didn't imagine that they would unite to harm him. The narrator then declared that the contestants were in a trap and that the situation was getting worse for them. Walden, not wanting to be left behind, began to use his summoning spells. He calmly walked over to his griffin and, before starting, asked Leo if he wanted help. Leo, with a determined look on his face, replied that he didn't need any help and would manage on his own. Walden, without saying another word, left, leaving Leo to go his own way. Meanwhile, Leo was facing all the powers at the same time, and Chelsea was extremely worried, as he was the only one left behind. Yura watched the situation with growing apprehension, realizing that the situation against Leo was much worse than expected, as everyone had joined together to try to defeat him. She knew that Leo's specialty was not with spirits, but with summoning, and she imagined that it would be a difficult task for him. But she was soon shocked to realize that he was using a technique of spell summoning, the spirit language. To her surprise, Leo seemed fluent in this language. Meanwhile, Nella, observing the scene, stared at Yura, leaving her even more surprised. She thought she would need this boy yesterday, given the situation. In the sky during the griffin race, some of the participants commented that Leo had fallen behind and that he certainly wouldn't be coming back. Elisa, hearing this, said that she didn't like what was happening at all, because even without anyone's help, she would have already beaten Leo and Walden. However, what bothered her was the impact this situation would have on her perception of their lessons. Senliu, for her part, commented that it didn't matter, as Leo was an easy target and no one would care about him. Elisa, however, warned Senliu to think ahead before acting, and as she took the lead in the race, she thought to herself that, despite everything, she would still be the best. She was convinced that if she carried on like this, second place wouldn't be a problem for her. She controlled her invocation masterfully, while Senliu, even with the fierce competition, believed that she could still do well. However, Chelsea was fast approaching, and she wasn't riding the griffin. Instead, she was literally surfing on it, which made Senliu panic. He shouted for them to eliminate the girl, but another competitor, a summoner, used her spirit to attack Chen. However, Chen Chen dodged easily and then performed an impressive maneuver, stepping over the girl and landing a powerful kick to her face. The girl was knocked down, and Chen turned to Chelsea, saying that the kick wasn't that strong since she hadn't even used an aura. Chelsea then shot forward, leaving her rival behind. Chen, smiling, said a brief hello to Sen Liu and teased him, saying that competing against him would be the worst mistake of his life. Sen Liu, irritated, replied that she should know that air combat was a total disadvantage for her, but added that she wasn't his only enemy, since someone was very angry with him. Just then, a huge explosion occurred in the background. Chen, observing, commented that Walden seemed to be the kind of person who always paid back in kind, as he was knocking everyone down with his explosions. Walden, for his part, thanked Sen Liu for the gift and said that he would now pay it all back with a big attack, launching a huge sphere of fire in Sen Liu's direction. The explosion knocked down almost all the competitors in its path, leaving Sen Liu destabilized. Meanwhile, the narrator reported that Leo Pluv, the first-year representative with the aspiration of becoming an all-class student, had fallen behind. He then wondered, could it be that invocation is his weak point? Meanwhile, Leo was staring at his griffin, which had a bruised wing, and said that forcing it was unfair. When he pulled on the reins, the griffin became very angry, but the narrator warned that it is not recommended to force a griffin in this way. Celia asked why he was trying so hard, and Reese commented that Leo probably had a plan. Leo continued to pull the griffin hard, saying that he knew how the animal felt. But now it was time to listen. He ordered them to stop, and the griffin lowered its little ear, calming down. With that, Leo was able to mount up and set off to race. The narrator pointed out that the griffin was still injured, but after fixing its wing, Leo finally took off, even though he was far behind. He encouraged the griffin, saying that even with the pain, it was time to move on. He recited, "According to the contract, he commands you to appear." And then the little phoenix appeared beside him, infusing the phoenix flames into the griffin's body. Celia watched the flames, confused, while Reese thought that maybe it was something to do with Zerdinger, but it didn't make sense, as it wasn't an aura. At the front, the other competitors were falling behind, due to Walden's destructive spells, until something approached at great speed. It was Leo. He accelerated even more, but suddenly stopped at the sight of something gigantic in front of him. What Walden was riding was not a griffin, but a Fafnir, a dragon-like creature. That explained what had happened a few minutes earlier. Elisa thought Walden might overtake her, but he created a summoning spell right in front of her, generating a huge explosion. Elisa was almost hit, but managed to dodge. She realized that the spell was an advanced summoning spell, something that wasn't common, and she knew that Walden, although he hadn't taken any magic lessons, was using something powerful. Walden then summoned an ice spirit and asked if Elisa could dodge it. A shower of ice stalactites shot out, but Elisa used a spell on her griffin, which spat fire to repel the ice attack, shattering it. Walden wondered if she had strengthened her summoning. The narrator commented that the battle was impressive. Elisa managed to block Walden's attack, while Chen Xia took advantage of their distraction to overtake them both. However, she was pulled by the neck by a spell from Elisa, who said she wouldn't let that happen. Almost at the same moment, a blast spell from Wen was fired, as if the two of them were against Chen, making the situation even more tense for her. Chen managed to dodge and get the spell off her neck, regain control of her griffin, and continue surfing on it. She thought to herself that her enemies were not to be trifled with. Suddenly, everyone was surprised to see the black wyvern, and Sen Liu declared that he was going to kill them all. Chen, realizing the situation, remarked that riding something that wasn't a griffin was against the rules, but Sen Liu told her to shut up, not caring. He ordered everyone to get out of his way, otherwise they would die. People began to wonder if Sen Liu had made a contract with the Black Wyvern, but soon concluded that this was no normal wyvern. It looked like a slightly irregular type of wyvern. Everyone then saw Leo approaching at an impressive speed, using the fire of the phoenix as a propellant. Sen Liu asked how he had already arrived so quickly, but he said it didn't matter. He was still going to kill him. Leo, with a firm and confident tone, asked everyone to listen to his words. His posture impressed those present. Leo questioned Sen Liu about where he had gotten that monster from, and Sen Liu replied, asking if Leo was jealous. He said that it was his power and that he had made the contract with his abilities. Leo, however, thought that Sen Liu was mistaken in thinking that it was a simple summoning. Leo knew that the monster he was riding was a Fafnir, a type of monster that the mages of Tartarus used. It was also one of the monsters that had been eliminated in the Age of Despair. Leo wondered how Sen Liu had gotten hold of a Fafnir. Sen Liu then fired an attack at Leo, who had to dodge quickly with his griffin. Everyone else also had to dodge, and even Elisa ended up being knocked down. The spell headed straight for Chen, who thought it was too late to dodge. She tried to block the blow, but the power of the attack was so great that it cracked her block, knocking her to the ground. Leo quickly went to her rescue, managing to catch her in midair and thinking that she had fainted. He carried her to safety and ordered everyone to move away, sending everyone else to the ground. Sen Liu commented that the feeling of overtaking his opponents was no big deal. The narrator observed that because of the situation, all the rivals were dropping out of the race and landing. The teacher, visibly annoyed, asked the narrator if he was just there to narrate and kicked him. She asked the teachers and assistants to stop the race as they needed to deal with the creature. Yura then stated that Senliu seemed to have hired a high-level demonic creature, and this left everyone shocked. She warned that the influence of this creature would soon drive him insane. Herod intervened, saying that Senliu shouldn't be the only one involved in this kind of contract and that there was something else behind it. Yura said that she would go after Senliu to kill the creature, while the other teachers would protect the students. The situation was about to escalate even further. While Herod and Sejin prepared to act together, all the others had landed. Leo was rescuing Chen when the others finally landed. Walden, observing the situation, commented that Leo was approaching them and asked if they were running away from Senliu. Chen, with his irreverent manner, questioned whether they were just standing there, taking no action, saying that the race wouldn't be any fun that way. Leo, however, replied calmly that they weren't running away and that what Senliu was controlling wasn't a wyvern. Senliu, annoyed, retorted that Leo, being only a student summoner, thought he knew more than he did. Leo then revealed that the creature Senliu was controlling was no ordinary wyvern, but a demonic Fafnir beast. Leo remembered how he had encountered these creatures in the past, many of them ravaging the skies, causing chaos and destruction. He declared that now was the time to eliminate that ridiculous monster, once and for all. He was ready to face the Fafnir. Senliu, laughing arrogantly, mocked Leo, calling him schizophrenic. Elisa, watching the scene, commented that Senliu wasn't thinking straight. In response, Senliu, with a cruel smile, fired another laser with the Fafnir, destroying everything in its path. However, Walden summoned a magical golem to block the attack. Walden declared that he would help Leo because he was the only person who would stand by him. Senliu, surprised by the action, questioned whether the golem was a magical summoning, but Elisa, determined, said that Leo was thinking too much of himself and that she would help too. Together, they needed to get Senliu off the demonic creature. Walden noted that the golem would soon fall, but Leo, appreciating the help, prepared for the next move. Senliu, sneering, commented on the golem's strength, saying that its summoning was truly incredible. However, the golem was destroyed, and Elisa, with a spiritual spell, almost hit Senliu. When he went to fire another laser, a series of explosions hit his face, and Walden shouted for Leo to take advantage of the gap. Senliu, surprised, wondered if they were working together. In the blink of an eye, Leo was at Senliu's side and landed a sharp blow, knocking him flat on his face. After knocking Senliu off the Fafnir, the demon who was controlling Senliu scoffed, saying that it was a good idea to fight the boy riding the creature, but that this was as far as he could go. Elisa and Walden were shocked as the Fafnir flew away again, now with Leo on top of it. The demon, curious, asked if the would-be hero was afraid, to which Leo replied that he knew he was a manipulative creature from Tartarus. He then asked, where is his original body? It can't be that far away. The demon, surprised, asked if Leo knew who he was, praising his attitude as worthy of a hero. However, he declared that Leo would now die. Senliu, despite being hit by Leo, still managed to block the blow, but was knocked off the Fafnir. Leo then summoned Fiora, asking her to shine. In doing so, he activated the flames of the Phoenix, combining all their powers. He thought that, although he was good at many things, he had never been a master of anything. Aaron and Dueno beat him in aura, Luna in magic, and Linus was a better summoner, so he decided to combine all his powers into one: aura, magic, and spiritual energy. The Fiora, now in its majestic form, appeared. Leo, observing Fafnir's reaction, said that the creature now seemed to be reacting to the power of the Phoenix. The manipulative demon, surprised, asked how Leo possessed a Phoenix, asking who this boy was. Leo, with a confident smile, said he would only tell if the demon told him where he got that Fafnir from. The manipulator revealed that he knew the creature from the Age of Despair and that it shouldn't be alive in this age. Leo realized that Fafnir's attack would be a great challenge, so he warned Fiora to block the energy, as he knew the technique would be extremely powerful. To protect himself, Leo used the Zerdinger sword's secret technique, the Breath of the Phoenix, which generated an explosion of flames. Fafnir's power, however, seemed to resist the blockade, until unexpectedly the manipulator's original body was attacked. Leo then realized that this was his loophole. Quickly, he fired a beam of fire so powerful that it burned everything in front of him. The manipulator hadn't anticipated such a reaction, and Fafnir was reduced to ashes by the intensity of the attack. After the big explosion, Leo, with a satisfied smile, praised Fiora for her excellent work. However, in mid-air, Fiora suddenly lost her powers, and Leo realized how critical his own condition was. He was in free fall, unable to avoid disaster. At the same time, the manipulator, who was trying to finish Leo off, was attacked by a very strong power, something that Leo recognized as coming from Sejin and Herod. They were dealing directly with the Tartarus manipulator, and, under pressure, the manipulator questioned whether it would be necessary to use 2 pillars of Lumen to defeat him. He was barely able to resist the pressure, and realizing that he had no more chances, announced that he would wait for the next opportunity, immediately teleporting away and disappearing. Before leaving, the manipulator killed the body he was using to hide, with the intention of appearing in another body in the future. Herod, meanwhile, commented that the manipulator would be back soon and absorb the fragments left behind to prevent it from returning. Sejin, aware of the threat, said that Lumine was in danger now, and Leo, in desperation, asked Fiora to return to the realm of invocation to help. That's when Professor Ayura appeared, rescuing Leo with her Ivern, relieved that she had arrived in time to help him. Yura expressed her concern for Leo, but was happy to have rescued him in time. Meanwhile, one of the hooded men was observing the situation and commented on the handler's defeat, pointing out that he had been beaten by a simple hero candidate. The manipulator, in a dismissive tone, replied that he was no ordinary person and that he knew Fafnir's true identity. The hooded woman was intrigued by this revelation and found it interesting. Back at the academy, Leo reflected on what had happened. The summoning test had been cancelled due to the events, and Sen Liu had been eliminated in that match. The students were apprehensive about Lumene's future and began to question Leo's contract with Fafnir. However, the teacher preferred to keep it a secret, clarifying that the real name of Leo's technique was Black Wyver and not Fafnir. Meanwhile, Leo headed to Professor Len's class, as it was the day of the practical magic test. On the way, everyone was shocked to see Chloe's appearance, as she was not at all well. Leo, for his part, was keeping a close eye on her, worried about what was happening. Professor Len entered the room and saw that everyone was present. He asked everyone to pay attention, as he hoped that everyone had prepared an original spell that reflected their own personality. Although it seemed a waste, he explained that he had called in 3 seniors to evaluate. These 3 seniors were considered the best students of the last 3 years: Rilda Pedney, Edmund Slack, and Sean Houge. The announcement generated excitement among the students, and Thomas commented that it looked like they would be getting help from experienced people, but Leo replied that it wasn't help. Professor Len then called on Eliana to be the first to present herself in front of the jury. She was visibly excited and full of enthusiasm to talk to the seniors, which made even Thomas uncomfortable. Eliana revealed that her main attribute was light, and by performing her spell, she created a powerful explosion of bright light, comparable to fireworks. She explained that by combining her power of light with that of flame, she could create a storm of flames and light. Rilda was impressed, as this kind of magic was rare, but Eidman quickly commented that it was more like conjuring a laser. After the judge's observations, Professor Len revealed that Eliana had scored a CE, which caused great surprise among the students, as they had all expected something better. The next performer was Thomas, who got a B+ with his golden coin magic. Chelsea, also performing next, used her ice magic and got a C grade, but was happy with the result. The judges felt that although the class was talented, they had yet to see anything really impressive. Edmund, one of the seniors, expressed curiosity about the remaining students, as he had heard that the next ones were good. The next student to present was Abad Llewellyn, and the girls were excited. Abad drew a complicated formula on the blackboard and announced that he was going to demonstrate a high-class magic entitled Storm. He remembered when he had prepared the spell in the Llewellyn house, where he had put up a protective barrier to perform his magic. When Abad concentrated all his power, he created a cyclone so strong that it breached the barrier, causing a small animal to be pulled inside. Concerned, Abad gently picked up the animal and placed it on his lap, making sure it was okay. He explained that his magic intensified the power of the wind, which, although simple, was very useful when done well. Abad received a higher mark for his skill. Chelsea, proud of her brother, smiled at him. Now it was the turn of Leo Plov, who was preparing to impress everyone. Leo claimed that the high-level magic he would show would not depend on specific attributes. The judges were intrigued, as they had never heard of such a peculiar concept. Leo explained that, unlike traditional spells, he had created a system of magic without attributes, which would simplify the whole process of casting spells. The judges were perplexed, with Sean asking if he was really suggesting a completely new system for casting magic. Leo confirmed this, but Professor Len excitedly thought that Leo could become a great magician. However, Edmund, clearly disappointed, commented that he wasn't there to listen to stories, and was hoping for something more substantial. Professor Len allowed Leo to present his work, showing genuine interest in learning about his theory. Rilda also allowed everyone to watch, saying that they could pay attention. So Leo began to write his notes on the blackboard, calmly explaining the fundamentals of the new magic system he had developed. Rilda commented that, in the entire history of magic, only one wizard had used a system completely different from the conventional ones. Leo confirmed that he knew of this case and mentioned Luna, the priestess of the constellations, a legendary figure that everyone talked about. Sean then questioned Leo, asking if he believed he could reach the same level as that legendary priestess, suggesting that he was trying to match her. Leo firmly denied this, acknowledging that Luna was an extraordinary mage, but asserted that it wasn't necessary to be a genius like her to create a new system for casting spells. Sean was deeply impressed by the complexity and originality of the theory presented in the painting. Rilda wondered if he wasn't just making it all up. Aman, observing the presentation, said that, according to the written formula, it would be possible to use any kind of magic without suffering penalties. Chelsea admitted that she couldn't even interpret the spell, while Thomas revealed that he had already given up trying to understand it. Chloe, silent, watched Leo intently. Edmund, curious, asked what Leo's motivation was for developing a new magic system. Leo replied that his wish was to be able to cast any spell freely, without attribute limitations. When he heard this, Edmund thought that this boy was completely crazy, but now he understood why he had been classified as that year's special student. So he asked what the spell he was demonstrating was called. Leo replied that the system was called the Bible, and then concentrated white magic, a pure form of energy with no attributes, to demonstrate it. Sean was even more surprised, as he remembered that only one person in history had ever used the term Bible to name a magic system: the fictional hero Kyle, creator of a legendary system. Sean began to wonder if perhaps Leo could prove that Kyle, or Gaius, had really existed. After the presentation, the students handed in their notes to the teacher, who announced that Leo Plav had obtained the highest mark. Leo then reflected that, although he hadn't managed to finish his magic system during his previous life as Kyle, he was determined to complete it in this new life. At that moment, Chloe stood up. She looked different, even her hair color had changed. Leo, showing concern, asked if she was all right, but they quickly remembered that she would be the last to present. Rilda commented that she had heard that Chloe was the best student in the class and wanted to know what she had prepared to show. Chloe revealed that her spell was a flame that never goes out. Immediately, the students were surprised, as they all believed that her magical attribute was ice. Chelsea was also intrigued, wondering if Chloe had deliberately chosen an element completely opposite to her own. Most found the spell too simple, expecting something more impressive from the best student in the class. Rilda, skeptical, questioned whether that was all there was to it, but Chloe replied that she was yet to show the true value of her magic. Then she summoned a magical waterfall directly over the conjured flames, and to everyone's surprise, the fire didn't go out. Even Leo was shocked by the result. Her colleagues asked if Chloe had used a permanent spell, and she confirmed it, explaining that unless it was directly cancelled, the flame would never be extinguished. She then undid the spell, ending the demonstration. Chloe reflected on the fact that every spell, without a continuous flow of mana, inevitably disappears. However, as she wrote down her formula on the board, everyone present paid attention. Edmund wondered silently if Chloe had created a spell capable of breaking this fundamental rule of magic. Chloe then finished writing down the structure of the spell and revealed its name, the Eternal Flame. Leo, watching everything, thought to himself that this was literally impossible. Creating a flame that never goes out was something that not even Luna had managed. Only one living being had used this kind of magic before, the legendary Erebos. Later, Leo was still unsettled by what he had seen. He asked Celia to call Chloe immediately, but Celia explained that Chloe was asleep because she hadn't been able to rest in the previous days while preparing for the exam. In view of this, Leo only regretted it, thinking that it would be a shame not to be able to talk to her at that moment, and then left, still immersed in thoughts about everything that had happened. Celia showed concern when she commented that Chloe had been acting strangely over the last few days, more sensitive than usual, which raised suspicions, especially since she had been getting into constant arguments with classmates from both her own class and others, as well as rumors that she was hanging out with delinquents linked to the magical studies program. Meanwhile, in the present, Leo summoned Fiora and lightly stroked her belly, but his real goal wasn't to see her, but to find her mother. When Farina appeared, he questioned the reason for the urgency, to which Leo replied that he was curious to know why she, a creature like the Phoenix, which is the complete opposite of a demonic monster, was present in Lumine. He believed that her presence could only be explained by some deeper reason. Farina then told him that 5 years ago there was an attack at Lumine, during which 2 students and 3 staff members lost their lives, but those responsible were never identified. Since then, the principal had tasked her with investigating what had happened, and she had been quietly gathering information since that day. Leo mentioned that she had certainly heard about the fake demon monster tamer, and Farina confirmed that she had, and even knew that a student had died because of it. Leo wanted to know if she suspected Tartarus was involved in this recent case, but Farina replied that, although she had her suspicions, there was no concrete proof yet. Leo then asked her to pass on this concern to the principal, saying that he believed there might be another student in a similar similar situation to Sen Liu, someone who had also made contact with the Tartar. Later, during the joint practical exam for the Hero Studies and Combat classes, all the students were gathered together, and Herod announced that the class representative would explain the details of the exam. Leo took the lead and explained that the exam would be based on the creation of teams whose mission would be to invade a world related to a hero, and that the event chosen as the basis was the Cheetor incident. Eliana, not recognizing the name, asked what it meant, surprising Nella, who was shocked by her colleague's ignorance. Herod asked for silence so that everyone could pay attention to the official explanation, and Leo read out the contents of the communiqué. He said that 30 years ago, a group of freshmen from the Lumen Academy had been sent on a mission in the central forest of Sedmar, but ended up being attacked by forces linked to Tartarus. At the time, a teacher called Albi, known for his special magical ability, was sent along with a rescue team, including a veteran second-year student. Luckily, the group managed to prevent the students from being completely massacred. The aim of today's test was to simulate that scenario. The teams would have to rescue the wounded, exterminate the demonic monsters, and cooperate with the work of Professor Albi, represented in the exercise. Herod concluded by saying that this test was not just another one of many, but a practical lesson in caution, vigilance, and survival, and that any student who didn't show enough potential by the end of the activity would be summarily expelled from the academy. Herod, with a smile on his face, reassured everyone that they were strong enough and that they could trust themselves. His words touched the students deeply, and they were moved by the confidence he conveyed. However, Herod soon interrupted the moment of reflection, asking everyone to focus on organizing the teams. Artiani was responsible for this, explaining that the teams would not be formed by the students, but would be drawn from a cauldron. When it was Leo's turn, he drew the number 11 and was placed in the last team. Artiani announced that the teams were formed, and the first team entered the summoning portal. Chelsea, smiling, asked if she was lucky enough to be with the Princess of Zerdinger, which reassured her, as she knew it was an advantage. Celia, for her part, declared that her team would show the strength of the Lordran Empire. Thus, the hero's record, the World of Alb, was activated, and they entered Albi's world, feeling all the intensity and power of the environment as they disappeared. The amazed spectators commented on the team's speed, admiring the speed of the children, who, due to their heroic lineage, were naturally different. Sejin remarked that with Celia in the team, the score was practically guaranteed, but Herod disagreed, saying that, for him, Chelsea was more impressive. Both were clearly competing, but everyone's attention was diverted when the director approached, leaving everyone surprised. He commented that the team's speed was impressive, and when asked by Sejin about his presence, replied that he just wanted to see the freshmen grow. The principal apologized to Professor Albi for bringing up painful memories, but Albi, with a serious countenance, replied that he would never forget the incident, and that he should thank him for the reminder. Soon, Team 1 had completed their attack, and the director reflected on the performance of the girls in Llewellyn, highlighting their excellent teamwork despite their pride, probably the result of their common origin. The following teams also finished their attacks. Abad and Duran, the most powerful, led the victory with their skills, while the team of Nella and Chen also performed impressively. With remarkable synergy, the director was particularly impressed by the performance of Chen Xia, whose movements were abnormal, even by his standards. Team S, made up of Walden, Elisa, and Eliana, also completed their attack, and the principal, looking at the various exceptional teams, recognized that the most promising student was in Team 11, Leo and Chloe. He thought that Leo Plav somehow aroused a sense of nostalgia. When asked if they were ready, Leo and Chloe nodded, and Albi then opened the hero's log to start the exam, which was marked by the prologue to the Shimur incident. However, something unexpected happened. An evil energy suddenly appeared, leaving Leo with the feeling that something was wrong. The intensity of this energy was much greater than before, and only Leo and Chloe were sent to Albi's world, while the others stayed behind. Sejin was shocked by what had happened, and the director, concerned, asked Albi what was going on. Albi, with a grave look on his face, replied that the test needed to be terminated immediately, as a demonic mark of death had appeared on Albi's hero world. The director, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, knew exactly what it was, an unusual manifestation. Chloe, desperate, warned that the phenomenon should appear after the mission warning, but Leo, confused, suggested that it could be a heroic manifestation. Chloe, however, explained that it wasn't that, but a lost page, the first time she had seen a record of heroes going out of control. Leo tried to question Albi about what to do next, but got no response. Chloe then then panicked, insisting that the test had to be paused immediately. She called for them to get out of that place as soon as possible, a decision that seemed to be the only viable option at that moment. Leo said that if they had the option, they would have already made the choice to leave, but the situation required them to face the heroic dungeon alone. He explained that, considering the circumstances, there was no other way to go. Chloe, shocked by the proposal, exclaimed, "Are you crazy?" She pointed out that this situation would be difficult even with a whole team, remembering the deaths that had occurred 30 years ago. Leo, however, insisted that if they wanted to get out of there was no alternative. Chloe, desperate, said that Tartarus had caused this incident in order to eliminate would-be heroes like them. In a moment of panic, she fell to the ground, overcome by the feeling that the whole forest was a death trap. Leo, trying to calm her down, asked her if she wasn't the strongest first-year student, and suggested that if they worked together, it would be easy to get out of the situation. Chloe, confused by Leo's calmness, wondered how he could be so calm in the face of the situation. She reflected that she finally seemed to have reached his level, and with that, stood up without Leo's help, deciding that they needed a plan. Leo explained that there were two conditions for resolving the Chedmur incident. Firstly, rescuing the first-year students, and secondly, ensuring their safety. The first thing they needed, he explained, was reinforcements. Chloe wondered how this would be possible, since no one from outside would be allowed in. Leo then surprised her by saying that they weren't the only students there. He reminded her that, despite the deaths in the first incident, some of the victims were still alive, but as memories, they could still be of help. Leo advanced towards her, which made Chloe wonder what he was doing. With a calm expression, he replied, "Hey, get on my back." Chloe, surprised, asked why he would do that, and Leo explained that they couldn't allow Tartarus to find the other students before them. In addition, he argued that, as Chloe was a mage, she would move more slowly, making her help crucial to reaching the others in time. Meanwhile, the group of memories was facing the creatures from the past in the forest and the threats from Tartarus. The demon responsible for all this was Chubarn, who, when he saw the approaching rescue team, made up of Leo and Chloe riding on his back, was indifferent. He declared that no matter who the targets were, they were only hero candidates, and therefore posed no significant threat at the moment. The situation was becoming increasingly tense, and time was running out for everyone. But then, he felt the potency of the power that Leo and Chloe had when they were together. And not only that, he also realized that Leo was classless, which made him even more interested, because he soon understood that he was facing the real hero called Kyle. Meanwhile, Leo reflected that the closer he got to the center of the forest, the darker it became. So he wondered if he should borrow Aeon's ability, deciding to refine and manipulate his aura to the maximum, pulling all his senses to the limit and activating his hyperperception, which made him see everything extremely clearly. So he ran straight into the forest and warned Chloe that there was a group of orcs ahead, even though she couldn't see anything at the time, but he was right, and she soon trusted Leo's instinct. So she climbed onto his back, prepared an ice spell, and cast several frozen spines that eliminated the orcs that were in the way. But she soon realized that one of them was still alive, precisely the one carrying a special horn, because if he blew that trumpet, all the other orcs in the forest would be alerted to their presence. But Leo acted quickly, cutting the orc in half and breaking the horn before it could make any sound, and at that moment Chloe clearly realized that there was still a gulf between her strength and Leo's, wondering if one day she would be able to catch up with him or even surpass him. But before she could think about it any further, they finally found the group of surviving students, and Chloe asked if those figures around them were really demons, while Leo, just seeing those beings, felt immense rage and asked Chloe to cover his rear with ice magic while he went into combat, and meanwhile the students tried to resist as best they could, even though they didn't stand a chance against the demons, and so they were completely surprised when one of the demons was cut in half by Leo in a single blow, which left all the other demons shocked and even the students themselves paralyzed, as Leo advanced with ease, defeating each enemy effortlessly, until Luna asked if they had come to help, and Leo replied yes, just as another demon tried to attack him with violence. And even though he was being shot at by more leech-like creatures that were advancing against him for some reason, Leo managed to protect himself at the last moment, relying only on his flaming aura that now covered his entire body, and the students watching the scene found it completely incredible. And one of the girls, who was a priestess, used incineration magic with divine power, creating a shower of sacred meteors that hit the demons directly, causing them to be burned by celestial energy. And at that moment, Chloe realized that this young woman was a priestess of the constellations, and although she wasn't sure yet, she believed that she would be able to confirm her identity later, as she already suspected that she was Aaliyah Ziran, Professor Albi's younger sister, who, according to the records of the Shedmure scenario, had died in that same forest after a direct attack by the demon Chubarn, the same one known to be one of the Knights of Tartarus. And so Chloe found it very strange, since in the original flow of the story, Aaliyah's entire team had been wiped out with no chance of survival. And while the priestess thanked Leo and Chloe for their help, saying that they had panicked the moment the demons appeared but were happy with the arrival of the rescue team, Chloe politely apologized and asked for a moment alone to talk to Leo, and during the conversation she revealed her suspicion that the girl was in fact Aaliyah, explaining that it wasn't possible to save her team during this scenario because according to the real timeline, they had all already died 30 years ago. Victims of the initial Tartarus attack that aimed to eliminate Aaliyah because she was a genius magician and a strong candidate for the title of hero, which would guarantee her name in the Register of Heroes. And that's why Chloe said that with the abilities they had now, it wouldn't be possible to change that fate, and that in order to fulfill all the conditions and completely change the course of history, they would need to find another team quickly. And when Leo asked if she intended to let Aaliyah's group die for Chubarn, Chloe said she didn't want to do that, but it was the only way they could survive, reminding them once again that in the real world, those people were already dead. But Leo replied firmly that he knew that, but he still didn't intend to give up on saving them, which left Chloe frustrated, asking if he couldn't understand the seriousness of the situation, until he lost control and shouted so loudly that he caught the attention of the priestess's group. And then, even annoyed, she admitted that Leo was incredible, recognizing that he was powerful like a true almighty, but reinforced that this wasn't the time to act like a hero because they didn't have time for that kind of emotion. And as she said this, she was visibly shaken. And Leo, in response, said that she shouldn't say these things as if she wasn't part of the same mission, because she was also a hero candidate. And so they weren't just behaving like heroes, they were on their way to becoming one for real, which made Chloe speechless at Leo's conviction, realizing that he was serious and that history had already been altered from the moment they arrived there, since the forest was supposed to be dark and empty when they found Aaliyah's team, but now there were survivors, and this proved that the timeline was changing. And even though she found it all irrational, Chloe decided to leave the final decision to Leo, who stated with determination that they would get out of there together with Aaliyah's team. And upon hearing this, Chloe asked if Leo was still ahead of her in terms of strength, and she herself mentally replied that yes, he was far ahead, while Tiad commented to the other students that it was a bit strange that only 2 people from the rescue team had shown up. And Dana agreed, saying that she also found it curious, since they both seemed to be about the same age as the group. And then Belak suggested that it could be a trap from Tartarus, while Aha questioned that what exactly they meant by that, saying that it didn't make sense for them to fight the demons if they were enemies. And then Aaliyah commented aloud that she thought that boy was quite cool, which surprised the group and made Dina ask if she had heard correctly, since it was Aaliyah who was saying that kind of thing. And when she replied asking if there was anything wrong with that, Dina explained that she just thought her style was more like her brother's. But before the subject could be extended, Leo approached to get everyone's attention and asked them to listen to the escape plan, explaining that they needed to get out of the forest as quickly as possible before it was too late. And when Ted questioned whether that was really necessary, remembering that they now had reinforcements and could take the opportunity to eliminate more monsters, Leo firmly denied it, saying that they couldn't take that risk, as there was a demon of knight rank chasing them, which made everyone even more frightened. And then Bella commented that a demon of that level was extremely dangerous, while Ted thought it was stronger than a whole platoon of soldiers. And Leo reinforced that this was exactly why they couldn't have any direct confrontation, making it clear that the main objective was to ensure everyone's survival and escape alive, at which point Aaliyah observed Leo's determined demeanor and thought that in some ways he resembled her brother. So Leo asked if everyone was ready, and after the group confirmed it, they started running towards the exit of the forest. And during their escape, Aaliyah noticed that Chloe didn't look well at all, as she had a strange downcast expression. Meanwhile, outside in the academy's library, all the teachers and administrative members were desperately searching for any records of heroes who had become Dangel heroes, as this was considered crucial to finding a way to save the students trapped in that world. And the principal commented that the fact that they still couldn't access the Dangel was, in a way, positive, as it meant that those involved were still alive. And Albie confirmed this by saying that it was impossible to enter a heroic Dangel school while the participants were inside, which was good news, as it indicated that both Leo and Chloe were still alive. And then Herod informed them that it had been 3 hours since the two had entered, and that it was most likely already night inside that dimension, which made the director ask what time exactly Albie had defeated Shoebarn 30 years ago, and Albie replied that it was around midnight. So the director concluded that all they could do now was hope that the events of that time would repeat themselves in a favorable way. But at that moment, someone arrived with an urgent message stating that they had found the person responsible for selling the demonic summoning catalyst to the student Sen Liu. But as she tried to continue with the information, the messenger stopped abruptly when she realized that Albie was seized by an intense fury, showing that he was ready to kill whoever was behind it. Then the director intervened and asked him to calm down. And Albie, realizing his own reaction, said he would leave for a while to cool off. And as he walked away, the messenger thought that this anger was understandable. After all, during the incident that happened 30 years ago, not even his sister's body had been found, which made his hatred of demons even more justifiable. The principal then asked who had sold the demonic catalysts, and the messenger replied that it was a black market dealer who had established himself in the alleys around the city of Lumeria. And although he wasn't unknown, he was even popular with some first-year students, which made it all the more worrying. And it was at this point that the principal asked if there was a Tartar spy infiltrating Lumeria, but the messenger explained that there was no direct link with the Tartars, although it was clear that the items had been passed on by them in some way, which indicated an indirect and very dangerous influence. And as he continued reading the report, the principal saw that Chloe Miller had received a book of black magic, which made him order Professor Len to be called immediately, while he silently observed her old scars and remembered the battles of the past, feeling that his instincts, forged by battles that had marked his life, were screaming like a warning. And then he thought that danger could be right under everyone's nose inside the academy, especially since at that very moment, inside a tower or perhaps near an ancient lighthouse, the students were at risk, without imagining what was approaching. And at the same time, in the forest, a real massacre was taking place, with Leo eliminating all the monsters without hesitation. And as he did so, he thought that it had been a long time since he had been using his hyper-perception ability, and that even the others were reaching their limit. So he warned them that they would stop to rest right there, which surprised some who asked if he wasn't tired, but they decided to sit under a tree to catch their breath anyway. And it was at that moment that Chloe showed a strange behavior. Something in her expression bothered even those who didn't know her well. And then Elia approached with a curious look, which made Chloe visibly nervous. But even so, Aaliyah wanted to ask something and asked directly what Chloe's relationship with Leo was, asking if they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and Chloe hastily replied that of course not. But Aaliyah commented that that reaction said exactly the opposite. And then Chloe thought that even though Aaliyah was a veteran who had joined the academy 30 years ago, at that moment she was still a freshman, and so deep down she wasn't so different from the people Chloe was used to dealing with. But then it was Chloe who asked why she was wondering that, insinuating that Elia was interested in Leo. And Aaliyah replied that her heart beat faster every time she saw him, and Chloe replied that then it could only be love at first sight, while thinking to herself that this really was Aaliyah Zeron, such a great mage that they still talked about her even after so long, and that made Leo even more impressive for having caught her eye. But Aaliyah said she wasn't sure if it was love or not because it was a strange feeling, like when she saw her brother, especially when he got in the way, but still managed to achieve his goals, which made Chloe ask if the wizard with the magic eye was clumsy. And Aaliyah replied in surprise, wanting to know what she was implying. And Chloe just said that she was referring to Albie Zeron, her brother. And Aaliyah confirmed it by saying that yes, he had always been like that, someone who never stopped trying to defy the impossible. And then Chloe said that it was similar to how she felt about Leo, because at first they were just friends, but now she felt deeply envious when she saw him achieve everything so naturally. And when she said that, Aaliyah responded by saying that maybe the two of them were alike. And later, when the group took a break, they sat down to talk more calmly. And Aaliyah said that she was also very envious of her brother, because even though he was such a mess, he managed to achieve many important things. And that annoyed her a lot at first, but she decided to reveal a secret by saying that the basic structure of her original magic had been created by Albie Zeron. And even though she was excellent at improving and using existing spells, she was terrible when it came to creating something from scratch, to the point where she failed the Academy's entrance test twice. And there came a point when she simply began to hate her brother, because she suffered from an inferiority complex, until all that envy turned into admiration. And then Chloe, listening carefully, thought that perhaps someone like Leo really was a person worthy of admiration. But the calm atmosphere ended when Leo suddenly stood up and warned everyone that running away was no longer an option, as the demonic power was fast approaching, and everyone began to prepare themselves while he said that they shouldn't be afraid, as everyone there was in the process of becoming a true hero. And then they picked up their weapons and activated their abilities, and it was at that moment that Chubarn appeared, stomping so hard that he broke the floor, saying loudly that he had finally found the damned candidate for the title of Great Hero. And Leo immediately remembered that during the Shedmere incident, Chubarn's order was to eliminate all the candidates for heroism, but instead of acting impersonally, he was showing a hatred directed only at him. And in addition, he called him the Great Hero, which made Leo wonder if by chance Chubarn had discovered that he was actually Kyle. And before he could make any move, Chloe began to prepare a great ice spell, but she was attacked directly by Chubarn and had to erect a huge frozen wall to protect herself. And then Leo wrapped himself in his flaming aura and advanced like a shining star, making a precise cut on Chubarn's neck. And even though the others thought he had been decapitated, his body regenerated quickly, rejoining his head to his torso, and Leo asked everyone to concentrate because they couldn't let him get close, explaining that he was marked with the Curse of the Void, a condition that completely nullifies any kind of attack. And then the students began to wonder if that meant he was invincible. But Leo replied that the Mark of the Void was not omnipotent, because Chubarn was not the conjurer of it, and therefore there should be a time limit for its use, at which point Chubarn scoffed, asking if they really thought they had a chance against him, who was an executioner of heroes. But Leo responded by asking if he was really that afraid of seeing a new great hero born, and soon after Chubarn challenged them all at the same time, causing Aaliyah to use her constellation magic again. And even though he wasn't hit directly, Chubarn began to feel the weight of that celestial power, and thought to himself that his lady was right, because they all needed to die there. And while all the students attacked together with everything they had, Chubarn launched a devastating attack that forced Leo to dodge with precision, and on impact, he destroyed the ground, scattering stone shards everywhere, hitting Dina and Belak, grazing them. And even though they were injured, Leo managed to rescue them in time, and when Aaliyah asked if everyone was okay, Dina replied that she could handle it, but Belak was more serious. So Leo quickly examined him and said that he was fine, as no vital organs had been hit, and asked Chloe to prepare to hit Chubarn with a really powerful attack. Chloe then replied that she just needed an opening to cast her spell, and it was at that moment that Leo used the magic of the fairies, creating several clones that began to move around Chubarn. And while this was happening, Chloe thought that while Leo was buying time with his attacks and distractions, she would be able to prepare for something strong enough to overcome even the Mark of the Void. So she opened the grimoire she had received earlier, a book shrouded in evil energy. But as she did so, she felt a different kind of magic flowing from it, something she hadn't experienced before, and the battlefield was already completely destroyed, while the others watched in silence, at once worried and impressed by the way Leo was facing Chubarn alone, using his clones to dodge with ease and open several cuts in the enemy's skin. And at that moment, Ted looked at that scene with admiration and wondered if one day he would be able to fight like that. And Dina, even wounded, commented that maybe so, but that Leo was simply incredible, while Aaliyah watched everything carefully and thought to herself that she recognized traces of the magic of the constellations in his movements, but she could also feel a clear trace of dark magic in the air. And it was then that she realized that Chloe was in the center of a circle of demonic summoning, radiating an energy so intense that it looked more like a demon than the Chloe he knew. And when he tried to warn Leo, Chloe, who was already partially possessed, said that it didn't matter if he was hit by the spell too, and launched a huge flaming laser that advanced against Chubarn with destructive force, which surprised Leo because he was sure that Chloe's natural attribute was ice, but that was clearly fire, a different kind of fire, which burned with a supernatural intensity. And then Chloe, with a dark look on her face, declared that this was the fire that never goes out, ordering Chubarn to die in agony, and meanwhile the surrounding environment darkened rapidly, making Leo realize that this magic was consuming everything. And so he shouted for Chloe to cancel it, but she, still influenced by the grimoire, said that someone like Chubarn didn't deserve any mercy, which made Leo decide to act on his own and advance towards her, cutting straight through the grimoire with his sword to put an end to the the spell. And when the power finally ceased, Chloe came back to herself with wide eyes. And Leo then asked her to be honest, asking her if that flame that wouldn't go out was really a magic unique to her. And Chloe, still shaken, confessed that it wasn't, explaining that it was just a spell she found inside the grimoire. And then they looked at Chubarn, who despite everything was on his feet, practically unharmed. And when he felt that energy, he thought that those were the real flames of Erebos. While Leo warned Chloe that what she had used was dark magic, and that grimoire was no ordinary book, but a demonic artifact, which made Chloe look at her own hands and ask in a low voice what she had done, saying that she no longer deserved to be considered a hero after that. But Leo replied firmly, asking her to pull herself together, saying that there was no mention in the records of Chubarn having the Mark of the Void at that point in the battle, which meant that Aaliyah's team, 30 years ago, had used up all the curse during the fight, and that however afraid they had felt, they hadn't run away and had kept fighting to the end in a battle that, for them, was simply impossible to win. Chloe remembered that it wasn't Lumei's motto that mattered at that moment, but the phrase she herself said about overcoming the past and moving beyond it. So Leo nodded, as if to say that he understood, and for the first time, Chloe realized that she admired Leo not only for his abilities, but because he was someone who was naturally trustworthy, someone who was easy to admire because he was so true and strong, even without wanting to show it. Aaliyah, realizing that Chloe was ready, held out her scepter and asked her to take it. And at that moment, Leo thought that, thanks to Chloe's magic, the Mark of the Void had finally disappeared, and now all that remained was to defeat Chubarn once and for all. But it was then that he heard something different, a spiritual language resonating in the air, which made Chloe reflect that she was also going to overcome her own limits, so that she would never again feel ashamed in front of the people who trusted her. Leo felt truly proud at that moment, because he recognized that the power Chloe was unleashing was incredible, a pure runic language, worthy of a real magician, and it immediately reminded him of Kyle, someone from his past who had mastered the same kind of power, which brought him a sense of comfort and nostalgia at the same time. When Chubarn lunged forward to attack, Leo intercepted his move, and their blades collided with such force that part of the ground shattered into pieces, and even though Leo managed to block the punch that was to follow, the impact was still so strong that it threw him against a tree, making Chubarn sneer at him and question whether that was all a would-be hero could do. But it was at that moment that he felt the cold spread and realized that everything around him was freezing fast. Leo then declared that, whether in the past or the present, demons would never be a match for heroes. And although Chubarn asked why he said that with such conviction, Leo replied that that was the end of the line for him, because Chloe, at that very moment, had finished preparing her most powerful magic, and now she was truly happy to be able to finish her unique magic on her own. It was then that Chloe activated the Icy World, a spiritual magic that completely froze everything around her, covering the field with a thick mist, while Chubarn's entire body was sealed inside a structure of pure ice. And Leo just walked up to him calmly, raised his sword, and destroyed the ice once and for all, ending the fight and defeating the enemy. Immediately afterwards, he found the cursed grimoire and, without hesitation, plunged his blade into the center of it, completely burning the dark artifact, which immediately activated a secret achievement that recognized their victory, showing that they had saved the first-year students, earned an extra reward, and eliminated Chubarn forever. Leo then praised Chloe, saying that her magic was really impressive because field magic was something he himself had never managed to master. And Chloe replied that this time she was going to tell everyone what she had done, even if she risked being expelled from the academy. But Leo assured her that there was no way a candidate like her could be expelled, because it was clear that she was born to be a hero. Aaliyah arrived praising them both, saying that they had been incredible, and Dina added that they were real heroes, while Leo stressed that they had all worked very well together on that mission, at which point Chloe thanked Aaliyah deeply for lending her the scepter, saying that they had only managed to beat Chubarn thanks to it. But Aaliyah refused the praise and asked her to keep the scepter, saying that it was now hers. Dina then said that that gift was the least of it, since they had saved everyone's lives, and also handed her own sword to Chloe. And it was just then that Albie came running up, shouting her sister's name, and Chloe commented on how strange it was to see her brother so young like that. While Leo said that it was understandable, since they were 30 years in the past, Albie quickly approached and asked if Chloe was alright, and Aaliyah replied yes, that the rescue team had arrived in good time, thus ending the moment with everyone relieved and safe. Chloe commented that she had also met someone who was exactly like Leo, someone who reminded her a lot of him in presence and attitude. But before she could continue reflecting on this, the stage called Alb's World was officially finished, along with the prologue to the Shedmure incident. And at that moment, she thought that the most important thing was that everyone had survived that intense experience. Only when they looked over, they realized that the figures who were there there had completely disappeared, which made Chloe realize that the heroic world was collapsing. Leo then noticed one last window opening in front of his eyes, where he received an additional reward for his recently completed internship, called mementos. And right after that moment, while Albie was still crying a lot over everything that had happened, Leo ended up losing consciousness and only woke up sometime later, already inside the infirmary, where he was surprised to see Professor Albie by his side, who thanked him deeply for saving everyone, also asked him to thank Miss Miller, and then quickly left, showing that he just wanted to leave that message before leaving. Shortly afterwards, the principal entered the infirmary and told Leo that he didn't need to get up to talk to him, calmly asking how he was feeling, to which Leo replied that he didn't feel anything unusual, just a little tired. And then the principal, with a more serious look, asked what exactly had happened inside that world, questioning whether the incident had any direct connection with Chloe's grimoire. Leo, surprised by the question, asked if the director already knew about it, and the director explained that before he even came there, he had confirmed that the place where Semleo bought his catalyst was the same place where Chloe bought her grimoire. And based on that, he concluded that that black grimoire was a tool of the demonic god, a revelation that explained a lot about recent events. It was then explained that the demon god's tools are actually fragments of the rebus, i.e., a crystallized form of the rebus itself. And Leo reflected that when these tools are used by demons, they become incredibly powerful weapons. But when they are used by other races, they cause serious side effects, such as the gradual collapse of the user's mind, which explained Chloe's unstable behavior. Leo decided it was best to tell the whole story from the beginning, so he explained in detail everything that had happened since they entered that stage. And after hearing everything, the director asked if Leo believed that the demon god's tool could really directly affect the heroic world, to which Leo replied yes, because the heroic dungeon only stabilized after he destroyed the grimoire fragment, and so far that was the best explanation they had. At that moment, Chloe woke up startled to see the principal in the infirmary, but he said she didn't need to get up, and then called Helena, who came in carrying some mysterious objects, explaining that the principal wanted to understand the origin of those artifacts, as they seemed unlikely to exist in that context. Chloe explained that she was carrying Ah's staff, an item that shouldn't even exist in her reality, and wanted to know how she had received it, while Helena, observing the situation, realized that Chloe hadn't received any reward from the system, which was unusual, especially considering that the whole thing involved the entrance exam and the shed mirror incident. It was then explained that, in heroic worlds, there are no rewards related to strategy, because the rewards are always defined on the basis of the owner of that world. But something unusual had happened there, because this rule had been broken, and Leo began to wonder if the reward he had received hadn't come again because of the pact with the King of the Elves. Leo then commented that he believed that was the real reward received at the end of the stage, and the director asked him if he was sure it was a strategy reward, and Leo confirmed that it was, but said he thought an anomaly had occurred at the very moment the world was turned into a dungeon, which could have interfered with the rules. Faced with all this, Leo decided that, for the time being, he would keep this information secret, as it was better not to reveal what he had discovered just yet. The principal commented that it seemed Miss Miller had no idea what was going on, as the memento's reward had only been awarded to Leo, and Chloe, even a little surprised, replied that perhaps this was because Leo was the one who had contributed most directly to resolving the incident, as it seemed only fair that the reward should be distributed on the basis of each person's contribution. And the principal agreed with this idea, saying that in that case, he himself would conduct a secret investigation into the phenomenon involving the mementos. He said that these mementos would be given to the families of those involved after the investigation was completed, and that until then, everyone should keep the existence of the demonic god's tool an absolute secret. But Chloe asked why this was so important, and the director explained that the enemy was not only present outside the academy walls, and that both she and Leo had been through extremely traumatic experiences, so now the most important thing was for both of them to rest. Chloe, a little embarrassed and awkward, turned to Leo and said that there was something important she needed to tell him. But before she could explain herself, Leo's friends suddenly appeared to check on him, and the situation was interrupted when the director, about to leave, remembered to tell them that there would be an afternoon party the next day, recommending that if they didn't already have formal attire, they should take the opportunity to visit the town and arrange something suitable. When the party started, the event's narrator appeared excitedly and explained that this was a big celebration dedicated to the first-year students who had survived the most difficult period of Lumene's midterm cycle, and asked a joking question about who would be the handsome guys and girls who would sit at the tables first, while Thomas, confused, asked if this was the prize for their achievements, and Tide replied that maybe they were too good for that academy anyway. Later, with everyone gathered in the decorated hall, Thomas and Teed were eating to their heart's content, enjoying every dish, when suddenly the doors opened, revealing two more heroes arriving at the party, Nella and Eliana, who were wearing elegant dresses that caught everyone's attention, making Teed even spit out his drink in surprise, while Thomas was impressed by their appearance and asked how they managed to look so wonderful. Eliana then asked if they had borrowed their parents' suits, and Thomas, embarrassed, said that he hated looking silly because of it, while Lumba, looking more formal, announced that the real pride of the Rodran Empire were now arriving, Abad's siblings Llewellyn and Chelsea, who really did look like princes and princesses, with their impeccable clothes, and Thomas commented that they looked really noble. Lunba, even more excited, announced that a real couple was now entering, Celia Zerdinger and Leo Plov, and Celia, already visibly annoyed, asked why her entrance had to be with Leo, while Leo replied indifferently that he didn't care either. But that didn't stop several girls from getting excited about his presence. After all, it was the class president, Leo Plov, who had been the highlight of the academy. Thomas commented that that boy was the real pride of everyone, while Eliana said that he was her little boss. And soon afterwards, the teacher in charge of the event stepped up to the microphone, and to everyone's surprise, the person in charge of announcing everything was none other than Professor Artian, who used the power of her spirit to amplify her own voice on the microphone, speaking so loudly that Thomas commented that the volume was a little too high, reminding everyone around that she had a habit of getting too carried away. Artian, realizing the impact of his own voice, replied that he was happy to see this reaction and announced that the time had come to reveal the official results of the midterm exam, which made Thomas apprehensive as he questioned how anyone could be happy to receive news like that. But Artiani replied that he had expected this kind of reaction and that, for this reason, he would only reveal the 3 best students from each department, while the rest would receive their results in private. It was then that the teachers from each area were called up to the stage to announce the students' names, and the first to go up was Elinol, responsible for the riders department, who said that everyone had worked very hard during the first race, and that he would now say the names in order, from first to third place. He announced that the best student in the night department was Celia Zerdinger, followed by Duran Moira in second place and Chen Xia in third, and Celia, on hearing her name, was surprised and at the same time wondered why Leo hadn't appeared on the scoreboard, while he, completely calm, was sitting at one of the tables just drinking his juice or soda, since he couldn't consume champagne during the event. Professor Len took to the stage to announce the results of the magic department and declared that Abed Llewellyn had won first place, followed by his sister Chelsea Llewellyn in second and Emilio Lucan in third place, which made Chelsea immediately wonder aloud why Leo hadn't appeared among the best, and Leo just replied quietly that these things happen. But Thomas, more attentive, commented that not only Leo, but also Chloe hadn't appeared in any of the rankings. Celia, realizing this, glanced discreetly at Chloe and saw that she was wearing a dull smile, trying to hide her discomfort, while Professor Len, in silence, thought that, after the discovery involving the cursed grimoire, those responsible for the exam probably had no choice but to reset Chloe's magical assessment, which was understandable considering the risks. But even so, he recognized that Miss Miller showed a real passion for her studies, something that could not be ignored. Sejin, upon hearing her name, commented in a low voice that, deep down in his heart, the best student in the department was still Chloe, and Herod, sitting next to him, just told him to shut up with a direct sit, which made Chloe even more embarrassed, even though she tried not to show it, and attention was soon diverted to Professor Yura, who entered the stage wearing an elegant dress that caught everyone's attention, to the point that some students whispered that they would like to be her summons just to be by her side the whole time. Yura then announced the top 3 in her department, starting with Walden Tyden in first place, followed by Elisa in second, and Jordoon in third, and Celia, realizing that Leo's name had not been mentioned in any of the departmental rankings, became even more intrigued, while Abad also began to suspect that there was something different going on. Ardiani returned to the center of the stage and asked if everyone was following along well so far, as the most awaited moment of the ceremony had finally arrived, which was the announcement of the student who had obtained the highest overall score in the midterm exam, and who would consequently become next year's new student representative. And when he finally revealed the name, he firmly announced that the first place winner was, of course, Leo Plov, who once again proved to be the best in his class. The announcement sparked a huge celebration at Leo's table, with applause and shouts of support, but at the same time, murmurs of disagreement began to emerge among some students. And Amelia was the first to wonder aloud how Leo could be the best if he didn't appear in any of the 3 department rankings, raising a point that caught the attention of many. Artian, clearly irritated by the questioning, responded impatiently by saying that there was an explanation, but that she was only going to repeat it once, asking everyone to listen carefully and keep it in their heads. And Herod, hearing her tone, commented to his colleagues that the teacher's foul-mouthed grandmotherly spirit was one of the best things about the academy, always amusing, and even Sedan agreed with him at that moment. Artiani then explained that students classified as multi-class, i.e. those who worked in more than one specialization at the same time, were not included in the traditional ranking of departments, precisely because their unique attributes prevented a fair comparison with students who specialized in only one area, and gave the example of a magical swordsman, who may appear to have a weak aura compared to a pure knight, but whose real strength comes from the synergy between physical abilities and magic, which cannot be measured by isolated rankings. She concluded by saying that Leo was the only one to obtain the maximum score in the joint test, which assessed knowledge of heroic studies combined with real combat, and that, for this reason, he deserved the title of Best Student of the Year and New Representative, not because of a specific department, but because of his balanced and complete mastery of all areas. One of the boys, still trying to understand the situation, commented that he didn't know exactly how it had happened, but recalled that the other students hadn't gotten a very high mark in that joint test either, which perhaps explained the result. But upon hearing this, Artiani wasted no time in responding, looking directly at him with a sharp look and asking if he was trying to contradict her, calling him a brat bluntly, and then made it clear that there was one more reason why Leo deserved that recognition. She firmly stated that, in addition to his top score, Leo had also been a real hero during the mission, as he was the one who had defeated Shubarn in battle, which immediately caused a huge reaction among the students present, leaving everyone extremely shocked by this revelation, since most of them hadn't even imagined the seriousness of the situation that had occurred. Meanwhile, Leo remained calm at his desk, not showing much, and just thinking to himself that he didn't like all the attention on him, just wishing it would be over soon, so he could get back to his routine. But deep down, he understood that this moment was important for everyone who took part in the mission. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because the story of Leo, Chloe, and this whole universe is just beginning. And comment below, do you think Leo will still accept being the center of attention? See you in the next video.